Claire was very surprised when there was a loud knock on her front door, then the doorbell rang several times in a row. She turned off the stove top and set the half-cooked scrambled eggs aside and went to the front door. She was completely shocked when she opened the door and two police officers were there. "Good morning, ma'am," Officer Holman said. "Would Heather Bradshaw be at home?" "Why yes, she is," Claire said and composed herself. "What's going on?" "We would like to talk to her about a crime that was committed last night," Officer Holman said. "Crime? What crime?" Claire asked, surprised. "We can't divulge the details, especially if she was involved in the planning," Officer Holman said. "Can you get her for us, please?" "Oh, I'll get her all right," Claire said as her shock was replaced by seething anger. "Please come in," she said and turned around and then stomped up the stairs. "Heather," she said loudly. "Heather." She yelled and reached the top of the stairs and disappeared from the officer's sight. "Get up right now." Officer Holman and his partner stepped into the entryway and exchanged looks as they listened to the woman yell at her daughter. "Mom," Heather said. "God, it's too early. I don't have to be up for school. Get your ass out of bed right now, young lady." Claire spat at her daughter. "The police are here to talk to you." "What?" Heather yelled. "Get dressed and get downstairs. Now." Claire yelled back. A moment later she appeared at the top of the stairs and walked down them calmly. "She'll be right down, officers." "Thank you," Officer Holman said, and the three of them waited for a couple of minutes before a very red-faced young woman appeared at the top of the stairs. She was dressed conservatively, as if she was attending a job interview and not meeting the police. She walked calmly down the stairs in an eerily similar walk like her mother's. "Good morning, officers. What is this all about?" Heather asked. "I'm sure you have some idea," Officer Holman said with a smile. "I have to assume that you know your ex-boyfriend Brad Willoughby." Heather opened her mouth to deny knowing him that well, then heard what he said. "Yes, I know him. Where were you last night between 7 and 11 o'clock? "With my boyfriend, Eric," Heather answered without pausing. "Eric." Officer Holman nodded to his partner. "You don't happen to have anyone else to corroborate your alibi?" "No, we were alone," Heather said and gave her mother a glance. "We weren't having sex, but we were making out at Johnson's Lookout." "Was that why he wasn't with Brad and his other friends?" Officer Holman's partner asked. "Eric doesn't hang out with them anymore," Heather said. "He tried to keep them from doing stupid stuff, and they treated him like a dog." "That's convenient," he said. "The one time he wasn't with them, they commit a crime." "What crime was that?" Heather asked. "That's what we were going to ask you," Officer Holman said. "Do you know where they were last night?" Heather opened her mouth to answer that she didn't, and Claire recognized her lying face. "Heather," Claire said in a deadly tone of voice. "Tell them the truth, or so help me God, you're going to regret it." Heather knew not to piss her mother off, so she sighed. "I don't know for sure where they were." "Heather," Claire spat. "But, Brad did text me and asked for Arnold's address." Claire took in a sharp breath and then her anger got the better of her. She took 2 steps forward and raised her hand, then gave her daughter one of the hardest slaps across the face that she had ever given anyone in her life. Heather's head whipped to the side and her hair flipped over her face and covered it for a moment, then Heather turned back to look at her mother with utter shock on her face and a red hand print on her cheek. Claire had never hit her like that before. Never. "Ma'am, please step back," Officer Holman warned her. Claire was breathing heavily, as if she had exhausted herself, and she closed her eyes and pulled her anger back, somehow. "Heather," she said in a calm voice and opened her eyes to look at her daughter. If they hurt that boy because of you, I swear on your father's grave that you'll be out on the street. And my mom. Heather gasped. No, they didn't. Arnold's working at the college. I knew they couldn't get him. She explained. Eric said that if I didn't tell Brad what he wanted to know, Brad would come to see me in person to get the address. I didn't want to see him again, and since Arnold wasn't home anyway, I told him. Oh, Heather. Claire shook her head. Did you forget that Annie was still at home? What would they want his mother for? Heather asked. They hate Arnold, not her. We'll need to see those texts. Officer Holman said, and Heather nodded and went back up the stairs to get her cell phone. A nice car pulled up to Annie's house and parked on the street, then woman in a business suit stepped out. Well, this is quite the mess, she said and walked over to Annie and Kelly. Hi, I'm Sharon Hart. I'm the policy holder, Annie Strickland. Annie said and held a hand out for her to shake. This is my son's girlfriend, Kelly Kendall. Nice to meet you both. Sharon said and shook Annie's hand, then shook Kelly's. I hate to ask what that smell is. Compost. Old and rotted compost. Annie said. They broke several windows that are now boarded up, and there's a pile of compost in the living room and some in the dining room. Sharon winced. Oh, dear. I only have one face mask. Annie said and held it out to her. Believe me, you are going to need it, especially since it's had all night to fester. Sharon was tempted to refuse and caught another whiff of it. I assume I'm walking through by myself, she said and put the cloth mask on over her nose and mouth. I went through it once, Annie said, sadly. I think losing the couch hurts the worst. The couch. Kelly gasped and took Annie into a hug. I'm going to miss that couch, too. We all spent so much time on it. Annie let out a sigh. Be careful where you step, she said to Sharon and gave her the key to the front door. It's all over the place once you leave the main hallway. Sharon nodded and took out her cell phone and started recording. She walked right up to the front door and went inside. Both Annie and Kelly heard her retch and she stepped back outside for a moment. She took several breaths and then went back inside. It took her 20 minutes to record what she needed and she went back outside. She strode over to the street with purpose, pulled off the face mask, and emptied her stomach into the storm drain at the side of curb. That's definitely not livable, Sharon said and threw up again. The stench is prevalent, even in parts of the house not directly touched, she said and stood up and turned her cell phone towards herself. I'll finish recording the state of the outside of the house, however, just the inside is enough to justify the claim. I recommend emptying the main affected rooms, at minimum, and possibly stripping the walls. It's soaked in a few spots where it splattered in the living room, dining room, kitchen, and hallway. Annie was a little surprised about the extent of the damage and only thought she would need to have the place professionally cleaned. Any porous surface, like cloth, rugs, carpets, drapes, etc., need to be disposed of. If any bacteria or bugs have infested the house, it needs to be fumigated as well. Oh, God, Annie whispered. That's going to take longer than 4 days. By the sounds of it, probably a week or 2 at least. Kelly whispered back. I can't imagine what this is going to cost. If my preliminary assessment is accepted, I would estimate about $4,000, not counting the fumigation and the generic cleanup, which could be anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500. Kelly's and Annie's mouths dropped open in shock. You said the police were here last night? Sharon asked and Annie nodded. I'll need the police report and I'll inform them of the cost of the damage. Annie took out Officer Holman's card and handed it to her. Thank you, Sharon said and used her cell phone to call him. Officer Holman. I'm Sharon Hart from Jackson Insurance. I'm here at Annie Strickland's house. She was quiet for a moment. Oh, definitely a higher charge. I estimate the cost from $6,000 to $7,500, minimum. She smiled. Yes, that will definitely make her happy. I'll send the report over as soon as I get back to the office. If you could send me a copy of the police report for the insurance company's records, I would appreciate it. She paused for a second. Thank you, officer. Goodbye. What's going to make me happy? Annie asked, curious. They can keep them until they finish processing the charges, which are significantly worse because of the amount of damage they did. Sharon said and handed Officer Holman's card back to her. I'll finish recording the outside and I'll run back to the office and get your claim processed as soon as possible. Thank you, Sharon. Annie said, gratefully. I'm sure I'll have preliminary approval within half an hour and full approval by tonight. Sharon said and gave her the front door key back. I'll have the approved living expenses deposited into your account at the bank as soon as possible. Thank you. Kelly said, before Annie said that she didn't need it. Here's my cell phone number. I'll be with Annie, so just call me when you hear anything. Sharon added the number to her phone, then she did a walk around the property. She recorded the boarded-up windows, the toilet paper, the egg splatters, and the compost impacts on the walls of the house. She gave Annie and Kelly a wave, climbed into her nice car and drove away. Kelly held her breath and walked over to the front door, locked and closed it, and went back over to Annie. We should go. We should call first. Annie said. I don't want to ruin the surprise. Kelly said with a grin. Kelly. Annie started to say. You know they are expecting me, so it's okay. Kelly said. Actually, I'm probably really late and they might even be worried. Annie gave her a concerned look and Kelly laughed. At least they haven't popped over to check, right? Annie let out a sigh. Just, get in the car. Kelly took Annie's hand for a moment. Don't worry, okay? You've met my mom, my real mom, when we were prepping for graduation and prom. She will want to help you as much as she can. Annie nodded and the two of them climbed into the front seat of the car and Annie drove over to Kelly's house. She was looking forward to meeting Catherine again and dreading it at the same time. They pulled into the long driveway and Annie parked off to the side to let the other two cars get by, then she followed Kelly to the front door. Kelly gave her a huge grin and rang the doorbell. What are you doing? Annie whispered just before the door opened and Kelly's mother stood there. Kelly! Catherine exclaimed. What are you doing? Visiting my folks. Kelly said and gave her mom a hug. Hi, Mom. Can we come in? You're just as funny as your father. Catherine said with a frown. Get your butt in here. Kelly laughed and stepped inside with Annie right behind her. Hi, Annie. Catherine said. How are you? Annie opened her mouth to speak and Kelly touched her arm. Mom, that's a conversation best left for after we come in to sit down. Kelly said. It's also close to lunchtime. Maybe we can get something to eat and drink? Of course. Catherine said in understanding and shut the front door. Let's go to the kitchen and I'll whip something up. Is Dad home? Kelly asked as they walked through the house. No, he's off playing golf today. What? Kelly looked at her mother like she was crazy. Dad doesn't play golf. Catherine chuckled. When the boss invites you out to hit a few balls on the green, even on your day off, you can't say no. That's the God's honest truth. Annie said. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. You can't even nibble at it. Catherine said with a laugh and had Annie and Kelly sit at the table while she prepared something quick and simple for lunch, which was a salad with some fruit chunks mixed in for flavor and a sweet dressing. Can you tell me why asking how Annie is doing caused my daughter to be all serious? Annie and Kelly exchanged looks, then Annie sighed. All right. It's like this. She started and then told Catherine all about what happened when she came home last night after she and Kelly had spent the weekend with Arnold. Arnold stood off to the side of the professor's desk and out of the way. If he had bothered to notice, he and the professor were the only men in the room that was full of young, and in some cases very beautiful, women. There were 43 of them, including Amy and the 6 lab workers performing the specimen dissections. They were all dressed in every combination of outfits that a woman could ever wear. Jeans, pants, blouses, tank tops, t-shirts, skirts, shorts, frilly tops, dresses, and anything else you could think of. Their hair colors and styles were also just as varied, as if they had coordinated it, because no two colors or styles were identical. They were also very loud and talked constantly about what they were observing, and they would throw in a random question about what they did that weekend. Their conversations were erratic and difficult for non-participants to follow, even if Arnold had tried to follow them. He didn't. "It's a wonderful sight, isn't it?" Professor Hamel-Krenslav whispered. "Only lucky men like us can ever see such a sight." Arnold nodded, because he had never seen 6 specimens being worked on at once. He didn't realize that the professor meant all the good-looking women in the class. The professor wasn't lecherous or lusted after his students, since that would be wholly improper. He was still a man though, so he couldn't deny enjoying the sight of them. "I will make an unobtrusive lap around the lab to observe, and then I will start my specimen," Hamel said, and left the desk, and Arnold watched as he expertly maneuvered around the workstations and the groups of young women around them. He answered questions when he was occasionally noticed and then moved on. Amy saw the professor make his token tour of the dissections and knew it was time to start her specimen as well. She excused herself from Cicely's side after praising her, then moved over to her workstation and waited until the professor was done and he went back to his desk. They both started their work at the same time and they were both lost to it. Amy really was quite good, and she did have quite proficient skills. She couldn't hold a candle to the professor's efficiency, however. He didn't waste any movements or energy as he worked, and Arnold stared at him as he replayed his own learned techniques and mentally adjusted them to fit the professor's more efficient and deft motions. They were in their own little world as they dissected their specimens and completed the task well before the lab workers did. The professor had his reassembled and prepared for viewing almost 10 minutes before Amy finished hers. She didn't feel daunted in the least, since the professor had 2 decades of practical experience over her and she had only been his assistant for a year. 20 minutes later, each lab worker finished their specimens and reassembled them. All of the young women in the room let out a collective sigh and stepped back from the tables. "Phew! What an ordeal!" one of them said. "My legs are killing me from standing up so long." Her friend laughed. "You can walk around the campus all day and standing still bothers you." "Ha! Oh, shut up. It's not the same," she responded, and the 2 of them laughed, as did a few others. "You all did very well and I applaud your diligence in staying for the entire procedure," Professor Krenslav said. "A special thanks to the lab workers as well. You all handled the pressure quite well." "Succinctly put, Miss Thomas," Hamel said, and attempted to give some eye contact to everyone. "Thank you all for being here. You may leave everything where it is and I'll see you tomorrow." "No cleanup?" one of the very pretty women asked and walked over to the professor. "Are you feeling okay, sir?" Hamel chuckled. "I'm in a particularly good mood, so you best take advantage of it, Miss White," he said. "Unless you would like to stay and help my assistants." "Is that my mother calling?" "Sorry, Professor. I need to go," Miss White said with a laugh, briefly touched the arm of his suit coat tenderly, then she left the lab. Of course, once one left, that started the torrent of exiting women and their loud conversations started again. Most of them said goodbye to the professor as they passed, and the 6 lab workers stood by the workstations and started to clean up. Professor Hamel-Krenslav waved at them. "You can leave as well," he said. "Go eat and prepare for your normal afternoon classes." You're the best, you arrogant little prick. Cicely exclaimed loudly. Cicely! Amy yelled. Hamill laughed. It's all right, Miss Hollister. I know she's using it as a term of endearment. I told you. Cicely said to Amy and walked over to the professor. You know I'd kiss your cheek if you would let me. You only like me because I don't hold your incorrigible and blasphemous language choices against you. Hamill said. Cicely laughed and tugged on his suit coat lapels. Damn right. She said, leaned to the side slightly and made a kissing noise with her lips, then she left the lab and her hips swayed happily. Okay, that just happened. Diane said, and the other 4 lab workers let out laughs. I'll take you up on the offer, too. She said and walked by Hamill. Thank you, Professor. You're quite welcome, Miss Harris. Hamill said, and the others left as well. When it was just him, Amy, and Arnold, he spoke. Amy, assist me in securing the specimens properly and storing them, now that everyone is out of the way and won't impede us. He looked at Arnold. If you could clean up the tools and clear the workstations while we do that, we should be done fairly quickly. Arnold nodded and stepped to the professor's desk and took out the clipboard and a handwritten inventory list, then went to the back of the lab to start the cleanup. Amy had a slight look of surprise and turned her head to look at the professor. She saw his smile and slight nod, and she understood that Arnold really was a better choice to take care of all the little details that would normally slow them down. Amy helped the professor and properly stored the specimens for future use by the students, and just as the professor had predicted, by the time they were done, Arnold had everything cleaned, graded, and put away. She was a bit surprised at how quickly he had done it, considering it had taken him an hour to set up 6 workstations and he just disassembled them and put everything back where it was supposed to go in less than half the time. Arnold had also disassembled her workstation and the professor's, and he came back into the lab with the clipboard. Without being asked, he sat down at the professor's desk and took out the laptop and brought up the inventory spreadsheet, added the new notations for the recently used equipment, then saved it and put the laptop and the clipboard away. Excellent work, Arnold. Hamill said and looked around the now clean lab. You can leave for lunch, and by the looks of it, you won't need to come back after to finish cleaning up. Is there anything else I can do, Professor? Arnold asked. We won't have to set up normal lab protocols for the students until the morning, so as long as you're here on time tomorrow, you can have the rest of the day off. Arnold nodded and left the lab. Sir, you should have let him prepare the displays for tomorrow, Amy said. He did well today, and he didn't get in the way with all those people in here, Hamill said. He deserved some time off for that. Sir, Arnold likes to work. If he has something to do, he'll do it until it's finished. Hamill gave her a skeptical look. I'll prove it after lunch, if you let me counter your order for time off, Amy said. I'll say that you forgot that you still needed his help. Because I did. Hamill chuckled and she nodded. All right. I'll stay around to see your proof, and I'll also see how he reacts to you ordering him around. Amy nodded and left the lab to grab something to eat from the cafeteria. She hoped that Cicely's observations about Arnold were right and that she didn't just hurt her reputation with the professor. Arnold went to the cafeteria to get something to eat. He still wore his suit, so he stood out like a sore thumb among all of the men and women dressed casually. He ignored that and grabbed a tray, then stood in line and waited for it to move along. What can I get for you, sweetie? The slightly overweight woman behind the long counter asked him. Arnold asked for a couple of the things he recognized, which were 2 large breaded chicken breast pieces on a plate and French fries on another. Gravy? She asked, and he shook his head. Anything for dessert, hon? Arnold didn't usually have dessert, but he looked around and saw a lot of red jiggly things on a lot of trays around the large cafeteria. Since he didn't want to stand out too much, he pointed to a small bowl behind the counter. The red gelatin, Arnold said, and she handed it to him. Anything else? She asked. Soda. There's a dispenser at the end by the register. Just tell them you're getting a drink, too. Thank you. Arnold said and moved down the counter and waited in line for the register. Soda, too. He said to the young woman that sat on the stool there. She rang up his purchases and handed him a plastic cup. It's self-serve, she said, and he looked at the dispenser. She let out a sigh and took his cup. What flavor do you want? Root beer, Arnold said, and she pushed the cup under the dispenser and it gushed water and syrup out in equal measure. She stopped with the cup nearly full. Do you want ice in it? No, Arnold said, and she popped the dispenser a little more to fill the cup completely, grabbed a top and popped it on and put it on the tray. I don't usually do this for people, you know, she said, and sat back down, then took Arnold's money and gave him change. I guess you didn't want to get your nice suit dirty in case it splashed on you. I've never used a soda dispenser before, Arnold said, and walked away and didn't see her as she looked at him with her mouth slightly open. Arnold. You handsome devil, Cicely said, and stood up and waved. Over here. That got everyone's attention even more than having someone close to 6 feet tall wearing a suit did. Arnold walked over to where Cicely was, and more than a few people asked who the guy in the suit was. I can't believe they let you out of the lab without cleaning it up first, a red-headed woman said from across the table as Arnold sat down beside Cicely. It's cleaned up and the specimens are stored, too, Arnold said, and started to eat. Efficiently, Arnold said, and the other girls at the table laughed. So, Professor Krenslav really did hire another assistant, a woman dressed in a business suit said as she walked over to the table. Her long black hair was pulled back from her face and tied up in a tight ponytail. Cicely started to sigh and caught herself. Hello, Ms. Power. You should call me Professor, Ms. Power said. I'm not in your department, Cicely responded, and the woman smiled. I'm surprised you're even talking to this man, considering he took your job, Ms. Power said to Cicely with a crooked smile. Farina is your best friend and you should be her assistant. You're not going to make me angry about this, Cicely said. Arnold is much better at the job than I would be. Oh. That's surprising, Ms. Power said. You never admit your faults. I didn't say I was bad at it. I said he was better. There's a difference, Cicely said. If you say so, Ms. Power said, and held a hand out to Arnold. I'm Professor Felicia Power, head of the chemistry department. It's nice to meet you. Why? Arnold asked and kept eating. What? People have said that to me a few times, Arnold said. Why is it nice to meet me? Everyone at the table fell silent. Ms. Power couldn't think of a good response to that, since it was a throwaway line that people said automatically when greeting each other. Her hand slowly lowered back to her side as her mind dithered over the problem Arnold just gave her. She looked around at the other people at the table and saw various states of surprise on their faces. Ms. Power took a breath, opened her mouth as if to speak, and realized it was too late to recover after pausing for so long, so she turned around and walked away. I can't kiss anyone except Kelly, Arnold reminded her, and she laughed. Cicely, what the hell are you doing? Amy asked as she came over with a food tray. Stop pawing at Arnold. Amy took in a sharp breath and then she laughed. Okay, I think that does deserve a kiss on the cheek. Arnold shrugged a little and started eating again. Amy sat down across from him and started eating herself. Conversation picked up around them, now that the spectacle was over, and everyone went back to eating. After a few minutes, Amy spoke. I talked to Professor Krenslav and he actually is going to need your help this afternoon. I had to remind him about all of the small specimens he has to prepare for tomorrow. Amy said. I have classes, so if you could go back to the lab after lunch, that would be great. Okay, Arnold said and kept eating. That went easier than I thought it would. Amy thought. I assumed I would have to argue a little about him losing the afternoon off, and all he did was agree. She smiled. Thank you. Arnold jerked a little as if to lean across the table, then stopped. I can't kiss anyone but Kelly. Everyone else at the table gave him an odd look and Cicely laughed. Ah. You poor slut. You can't get another kiss from the kissing bandit. Ha ha. Cicely said. Lunch ended and Amy, Cicely, and the other girls went to their normal classes while Arnold went back to the lab. Ah, I see the industrious Amy convinced you to come back, even though I gave you the afternoon off. Professor Hamel-Krenslav said. Good, good. I really do need your help. Arnold watched as Hamel took out the lesson plan for the next day. It was regular classes all morning and there would be 3 classes of 36 students, each class being an hour with 10 minutes between them, which used up the entire morning. I've got to have 108 student-ready specimens for dissection, and 6 display models already fully prepped. Hamel said. How much do we do on the student versions? Arnold asked. We're only doing the initial cuts and opening them up to give the students easier access. Hamel said. I remember last term where one of them tried to cut open the underbelly of a specimen with one of the spreaders. Arnold gave him raised eyebrows and Hamel laughed. Yes, exactly. Hamel said. It's the price we must pay for students only taking the biology class as a prerequisite and not as a career. He said. We need to have the specimen started and tacked back in place for easy access. Hamel didn't comment about it, but he was impressed that Amy was correct and had given him the proof he wanted. Arnold worked without pause or complaint and they did all 108 student specimens and then did 6 full dissections for the lab workers to use as display models. I must thank her for showing me Arnold's outstanding work ethic. Hamel thought as Arnold helped him store everything for the morning. It had taken quite some time for Heather to convince the 2 police officers that she had nothing to do with any crime that had happened the night before. With the cell phone texts and the GPS proof that an app on her phone showed them where her phone was, they had to accept that she wasn't physically involved. Since she was with Eric at the time as well, their lead that he had been involved was also dead in the water. Miss Bradshaw, thank you for clearing this up for us. Officer Holman said and reached for the door handle when his cell phone rang. Hello? Yes. All right. Uh-huh. Of course. Thank you as well. Goodbye. He put his phone away and looked at Heather. I just have one more question. Heather didn't quite stop her sigh from escaping. Do you know of any other crimes that Mr. Willoughby and his friends have been up to? Heather opened her mouth to respond with no and saw the glare that her mother gave her. Not really. Both officers perked up at that statement. The night of the prom, Brad and his friends might have spray-painted the bridge. Heather said. Oh, God. Claire said and covered her face with a hand. Heather, why? I wasn't there. Heather exclaimed. I only know about it because Eric told me where Brad went after Brad left me alone in his car. Claire successfully ignored Heather's public sex implication. Heather, the bridge is federal property. Check my GPS and you'll see I was only in the school parking lot and then Eric drove me home. Heather said. Neither of us went near the bridge that night. It doesn't matter. You didn't report knowledge of a crime either before or after. Claire said, sadly. It can also be classed as a felony. Officer Holman said and both Claire and Heather caught their breath. Defacing government property is a serious crime. If the prosecutor is in a good mood when this hits his desk, they might only get an infraction added to their charges. Oh, God. Claire said and had to sit down. God. I wasn't involved. Heather said and sat next to her mother. I don't even know if they actually did it or what they did. I think we need to take a little trip down to the station. Officer Holman said. We'll need to pick up the boyfriend as well. His partner added. At the very least, he was still a part of their group at the time and knew what they were doing. Do we need a lawyer? Claire asked and hoped beyond hope that they didn't. Your daughter has been cooperating, so we are only confirming her placing Mr. Willoughby at the scenes of both crimes. Officer Holman said, then he thought about it. Unless there's anything else you want to tell us about him and what he's been doing lately. Heather didn't hesitate this time and pointed to her cell phone. He handed it to her and she brought up the posted video that had been shared all over social media and the gaming websites. She handed it back and he played it. Jesus, it has over 100,000 views already. His partner said and the two of them watched it. All right, I think I just saw enough motivation for what happened at the Strickland residence. What did you say? What happened at Annie's house? Claire asked, real concern in her voice. We shouldn't discuss it until we head down to the station. Officer Holman said. I should call a lawyer. Claire said and stood. That is your right, if you're sure your daughter is guilty and needs one, even though she hasn't been charged with anything yet. Officer Holman's partner said. Claire winced at the yet. Please, don't recommend that she be charged. She said. She's cooperating and she let you know who defaced the bridge. Officer Holman gave his partner a look and they both shrugged slightly. All right. I give my word that we will point out she's helping with the investigation and shouldn't be charged. Thank you. Claire said, relieved. Heather, let's go. The two officers led the two women out of the house and after Claire promised to stay right behind them, let Heather ride in her mother's car and not the squad car. As Officer Holman drove to the station, his partner called in a request to pick up Eric. They arrived at the station and Heather and Claire were led into the squad room. Claire had been there years ago and she wasn't surprised that it hadn't changed at all. It had been a traumatic time for her and she remembered what it looked like. Right this way. Officer Holman said and led her and her daughter into a small office and had them sit down to wait. I'll be right back. Claire nodded and he left them alone. This is some great mess you've gotten into. Mom, I told you I wasn't involved. Heather said. Just knowing about it has involved you. Claire said. I just hope that officer keeps his word. What? Heather looked at her mother. What do you mean? He could change his mind, especially if Eric doesn't cooperate or confirms your story. Heather took in a deep breath and let it out. He's a good guy. He'll tell them everything. He better. Claire said and took out her cell phone. Who are you calling? Heather asked. Annie. Claire said and dialed. There was no answer and she tried again. I hope she's okay. They wouldn't do anything to Arnold's mother. Heather said, sure of that. You don't know much about angry men in a mob, do you? Claire asked. What do you mean? Heather asked. They are stupid and make rash decisions. If she was home when they went over to get Arnold. No, they wouldn't. Just seeing Arnold's mom would stop them from doing anything. Heather said. I can't describe it. Claire had to agree. There was something about her that made you think that you didn't want to mess with her. She just hoped Brad was smart enough to see that and left her alone. Kelly. Heather said loudly. We can't call Arnold or his mother, but we can call Kelly. She should know what happened. Claire nodded and brought up Kelly's contact info and hit her name. Are you two enjoying yourselves? Detective Tanner asked Officer Holman and his partner as they listened to the mother and daughter talking. We're getting confirmation that she really didn't have anything to do with it, and we just learned they know someone else that might be involved. Officer Holman said. I doubt she'll have any foreknowledge of the crimes committed if she was with Ms. Strickland's son the whole time. Get an eyeful of this. His partner said and played the video for her. Detective Tanner laughed. There's clear revenge right there. That's just embarrassing. Plus, now we don't have to tell them what happened. Officer Holman said. They are finding out the seriousness on their own and we can use that to pressure the others. Oh. Do you think they know more than they're saying? Detective Tanner asked. No. After some subversive prompting from her mother, she told us what she knew. Officer Holman said. She's protesting pretty loudly that she only knew some things and wasn't physically involved. Hey, you know this is working pretty well. His partner said. Are you thinking we could put them all in the same room? Officer Holman asked. At least this Eric kid in his old group first, then we can see if anything comes up. His partner said. If nothing happens, we can toss in the ex-girlfriend and see who blows up first. Officer Holman smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. Let's get it set up for the conference room. Do you need an assist? Detective Tanner asked. You're not trying to horn in on our case, are you? Officer Holman chuckled. I've met this kid. Detective Tanner said and pointed to the video. I'd like to know how it got to this point. Now that's a good line of questions for the ex-girlfriend. Officer Holman said. Go ahead and talk to the Bradshaws while we get the conference room ready. Detective Tanner nodded and went into the small dummy office to get the history of the conflict. Oh, my God! Claire exclaimed as Kelly told her what happened. How's Annie? Is she okay? She paused. She wasn't there when it happened. Thank God. She said. I'm so sorry. She waited a moment. Tell her that Heather is helping to stick it to Brad. Yes, really. We're at the police station right now. Heather sat anxiously beside her mother and waited. She's making this out to put me in a good light. We even told them that Brad and his friends spray painted the bridge. Claire said and smiled. Oh, yes. This isn't just personal vandalism anymore and it's not going to go away. She paused and nodded. Yes, send me what you have. She said and her phone beeped at her. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much. All right. Bye. Let me see. Heather said and leaned over the cell phone and then she gasped. Oh, my God. That's horrible. Claire said, her voice full of sadness as they watched the video. They just paid it off and now it looks like that. Mom, I had no idea, that's just. Heather's eyes teared up. I'm so glad they weren't home. Me, too. Claire said. Me, too. The door to the office opened and a woman wearing a black A-line skirt and a green blouse strode in. Hi, there. I'm Detective Tanner. Detective? Claire asked, a little surprised. Detective Tanner let out a short laugh. You can relax. I'm just assisting by getting some background information from you while the officers are busy. She said and sat down. First off, how do you know Arnold Strickland? We met at school. Heather said. He didn't notice me at all at first, at least I thought he didn't, then he said that he did notice me because his mother told him not to ignore important things. Both Detective Tanner and Claire were impressed at the great pickup line, then they listened to everything that Heather had to say about their relationship and everything that happened between them, Brad, and his friends. Brad and his friends were led from the holding cell and into a large conference room and told to wait there. To their surprise, they were left alone. A couple of them started to talk and Kevin hushed them. They all sat down in random chairs and waited for a few minutes, then the door to the room opened and Eric came in. You. Brad shot to his feet. What are you doing here? Guilt by association. Eric spat, sighed, then walked over to the table and sat down. I'm not even going to ask what you idiots did last night, because I honestly don't want to know. You missed a great time, man. One of the guys said. Shut it. Kevin said. It was such a great time that we're all in jail because of it and I wasn't even there. Eric said. That sure is great. Thanks a lot. Hey, man. You saw that video. We couldn't let that go. One of the other guys said. Shut up. Kevin yelled. Geez, man. Relax. The guy said. What's vandalism anyway? A petty crime? He laughed. My dad will have me out by tonight. What about the rest of us? One of them asked. Do we have to take the fall for you guys? What else do I have to say? Kevin said loudly. Shut your damn faces. If we all stay quiet, they got nothing. Nothing. Only witnesses, video, catching you red-handed while committing the crime, and a previous history of committing crimes. Eric said with a laugh. Yeah, they got nothing on you at all. The other guys, including Brad, had slightly worried faces. It was just toilet paper and eggs. Kevin said. A kid's prank. You forgot breaking the windows and throwing shit inside. One of the guys said with a grin. God, that was fun. Calm down. We didn't enter the place. Kevin said. God, I beg you. Kill me now. Eric said and sat down again and put his head in his hands. Look, we'll get out of this. I promise. Brad said. This isn't even as bad as that time I swear this is comedy gold. We need to get an award for this. Officer Holman said and his partner laughed as they listened to the suspects berate each other over all the stupid stuff they did. You are staying in the spare room and that's that. Catherine said adamantly. Go out to the car and get your suitcases and come right back in here. Catherine, I can't impose on you like this. Annie tried to say again. You would be imposing if you didn't stay here when I'm telling you to. That doesn't make sense. Annie said. Neither does refusing. Catherine said with a smile and Annie sighed. Kelly, make sure she doesn't run off or something between here and the driveway. Kelly laughed. I'll do my best. They went out to the car and retrieved the 2 suitcases and came back to the house. MOM. We made it back. Kelly exclaimed to make her mother laugh. Let's get you settled in. Catherine said and led Annie to the spare room. They quickly unpacked her things and put them away. How did you get so much into such a small suitcase? I just dumped it in and didn't pack it. Annie said. Catherine gave her a disbelieving look, then chuckled. I have to remember that. I was not staying in there with that smell any longer than I had to. Annie said. It was awful. I hope you know that the insurance company gave you a very low estimate. Catherine said. I bet she only included material costs and not labor. Maybe she did that to get the approval pushed through. Kelly asked. If they think it's only going to be low, then when it get approved, it won't matter if it costs more. Maybe. Catherine said. I guess we'll find out tonight. Catherine, thank you for letting me stay here. Annie said. I just have one question. What's that? What is your husband going to say about it? He doesn't have a choice, dear. Catherine said with a chuckle. You can just hang a bra on the door handle and he'll avoid this room like the plague. Annie snorted and then laughed. In the back of her mind, she remembered what Diane said about being comfortable enough around someone to laugh hard and without restraint. Do you want to help me prepare a nice supper for him? He's going to be hungry from sweating under his boss all day. Annie opened her mouth to comment on how bad that sounded and looked at Kelly, whose mouth was also open to speak to also comment on it, then they both laughed. I'd be delighted to help. Annie said. The 3 of them went to the kitchen to make a good meal for the man of the house, who was now outnumbered again, and they needed to at least try to make him think that was a good thing. Arnold left the lab when the workday was over and went to the cafeteria to get something to eat for supper. The place was only half as crowded as it was at lunchtime and he was at the counter quickly. "Hi, Han." The overweight woman behind the counter said in recognition. "Want the same as today?" "Yes," Arnold said, and she gave him the 2 chicken breast pieces and a plate of fries and one of the last Jell-O bowls. He walked over to the cash register and the same girl was there. "Pop, too?" she asked and he nodded, so she got him a root beer with no ice and put the top on the plastic cup and put it on his tray. "I think it's amazing that you haven't used a dispenser before," she said, and took his money and gave him change. "I guess you don't eat out a lot." Arnold shook his head no. "Are you seeing anyone?" she asked. "I have a girlfriend," Arnold said. "That figures. I get the courage to talk to you and you're taken," she said with a laugh. "Well, if you get bored or anything, give me a call," she said, and put a piece of paper with her name and number on it onto his tray. "We can hang out or something." "Okay," Arnold said, and put the paper in his pocket as he walked over to the same table he had used at lunch. No one was there, so he sat down and ate his meal, then brought the dishes back up to the counter and put the tray on the stack of dirty ones. "You know, you're the only one that brings them back," the slightly overweight woman behind the counter said. "See you tomorrow." Doris let him go and looked into his eyes and confirmed her guess. "Thank you, Arnold." Arnold jerked slightly, then remembered what Cicely did at lunch and he bent over slightly and turned his head. "I can't kiss you, but you can kiss my cheek." Doris let out a laugh and held his head steady as she gave Arnold a big kiss on his cheek. "There. One kiss, firmly planted. You better hope nothing grows from it." A few of the girls in the lobby of the building let out laughs from that. "Now get upstairs and call your girlfriend. She's waiting to hear from you," Doris said. "Okay," Arnold said, and went to the elevator. "Wow, you really live here," a young woman said, and stepped next to him. "Doris said you have a girlfriend," she said, and Arnold didn't say anything. The elevator opened and he stepped in, so she stepped in and one of her friends did as well. "Are you happy together?" "Yes," Arnold said. "That's too bad. I mean, for me. I wouldn't mind spending some quality time with you." Arnold didn't say anything and she sighed. The elevator reached the top floor and Arnold stepped out into a similar scene that he had seen that morning, only this time in reverse. Instead of various states of getting dressed, they were in various states of getting undressed. Some of them reacted the same way at having a man seeing them half-dressed, and others had almost immediately become used to having him there. "You should at least cover your eyes or something," a brunette said from her doorway as Arnold passed her and approached his dorm room. "Why?" Arnold asked. "Why?" she asked, a little incredulous, and waved at the hallway. "Look at all the half-naked women you just walked by." Arnold turned around and looked at them, then he used the technique the professor had shown him about making eye contact with each of them briefly. Nearly all of them reacted to his stare in some way. Some favorably, some not, and most accepted the scrutiny because they were there and knew others would see them, especially with their bodies on display like they were. "Aren't you embarrassed at seeing them all like this?" she asked. "No," Arnold said. "They are all very pretty." A few gasps were heard, a few sharp breaths, conversations paused, a few shifted where they stood, and a couple of them even ducked back into their rooms and out of sight from embarrassment. The brunette was surprised at his statement. It's not fair that you get to see us like this," she said as she tried to make him feel guilty about it. "Okay," Arnold said and opened his dorm room door, then took off his suit coat and tossed it into the room on the chair by the kitchenette table. He unbuttoned the collar of his shirt and then the cuffs. "What are you doing?" the brunette asked, a little unsure of the turn of events. "Getting undressed," Arnold said and unbuttoned the shirt. The girl watched his hands go all the way down to the bottom, then she caught her breath when he pulled open his shirt and took it off. Oh, baby. Someone down the hallway exclaimed. Take it off. Oh, my God. I think he's really doing it. Another one said as Arnold tossed his shirt onto the chair. The brunette next door could only stand there and stare at him as he opened up his suit pants and pulled them off. Her mouth made that little "oh" of surprise as Arnold tossed his pants into the room. Everyone that was there came out into the hallway, even the embarrassed ones, and stared in complete silence at Arnold as he stood there in just his underwear. A few of them had their cell phones out and were recording him, too. Arnold saw how a lot of them were standing, so he copied them and leaned partially against the wall with his hands behind his back, and stayed there. This place just got interesting. A lone voice said into the silence, then a lot of the girls laughed. What are you doing? The brunette asked and couldn't help looking at all of Arnold that was on display. Making things fair. Arnold said. But, you said you had a girlfriend. She said. Won't she be upset? No. Arnold said, then stood up straight and walked into the dorm room. Ah, show's over. Someone said, and then she almost choked when Arnold came right back out and leaned against the wall in the same spot, still in his underwear, and used his cell phone. Hi. Arnold said. I'm standing in the hallway of the dorm in my underwear. He paused. It's only fair. There's 14 women here in towels and underwear. He waited for a moment. No. He said. Yes, I'm talking to the girl next door. She's wearing shorts and a bra. Okay. He looked at the brunette. What's your name? Emily. She responded and didn't even consider lying about it. Her name's Emily. Arnold said and then fell silent. Emily was really surprised that he had literally called his girlfriend to prove that she was okay with what he was doing. Nearly everyone else in the hallway went back to their normal conversations and the ones recording him stopped. Apparently, the novelty of having a half-naked man around wore off quickly for most of them. Okay. Send it to me. Arnold said and his phone beeped at him. Yes, I'll stay here no matter what I see. He made 3 lip smacks into the phone. Goodbye. He said and hung up. What is it? Emily asked and stepped close as she let her curiosity overwhelm her aversion to getting closer to a half-naked man she didn't know. Brad and his friends vandalized my house to get at me. Arnold said and played the video. Oh, no. Emily exclaimed when she saw the state of the house and put a hand on his arm. I'm so sorry. That looked like it used to be a nice house. We just paid it off with the insurance money from my father's death. Arnold said and played the video again. Your father just died? Emily said loudly, and that got a lot of people's attention. What are you doing here? I took this job at the college to support the family. Arnold said. Emily took several breaths and her hand slowly rubbed his muscular arm. Are you going home to deal with that? She asked and motioned to the video. Her heart went out to him in his time of need. Kelly told me to stay here and keep working. Arnold said. I suppose that's the responsible thing to do. Emily responded. I guess you have to wait until the weekend to go home. Arnold nodded and turned off the phone. What's your name? Arnold. Emily slid her hand down his arm and took his hand and shook it. Hi, Arnold. I'm your neighbor. She said and let his hand go. If you need to talk or anything, just knock and let me know. Offer him a cup of sugar. A girl down the hallway nearly yelled. He has a girlfriend. Emily said loudly as she turned to glare at her, and the other girl laughed. What does she mean? Arnold asked. Usually a guy or a girl shows up at someone's place and they ask for a cup of sugar. It's just an excuse to come visit, and they usually turn the visit into sex. Emily explained before she realized she had said it to the half-naked man right in front of her. Her face flushed red from embarrassment. Yeah. Ah. Arnold reached up and cupped the side of her face tenderly. Are you okay? Emily's face burned bright red. Yes. I'm fine. She yelled and jumped back, then slammed her door shut. There was a whistle and a few claps of applause from one of the girls a few doors down. Way to go, Arnold. She said and gave him a little wave. Arnold waved back and went into the dorm room. To her surprise, he didn't shut the door. She got her roommate's attention and the two of them watched him hang his suit up. When he walked towards the bathroom, they both held their breath. When he stepped inside and shut the bathroom door, they both groaned in disappointment. Maybe next time. One of them said, then they both laughed. How long are they going to keep us here? Heather asked her mother as she looked at the clock on the wall after the detective left. It was getting close to 10 o'clock at night and they had missed supper. I'd guess until either you are thoroughly scared of what can happen to you for being associated with Brad and his friends, or until they decide you've suffered enough with the guilt. Claire said. Believe me, if it's the latter, you're going to be suffering for a long time to come. Heather thought about arguing with her mother about that, then she sighed and nodded. Mom, you know I'm sorry about what happened. Yes, and like I said, you will be for a long time. Claire said. How could you be so stupid? I explained why I gave him the address. Heather responded. What else am I supposed to say besides sorry? Is there anything else I can say? Do you regret it? Claire asked. Of course I do. Heather said. I know the problems Arnold and his mom have gone through. Losing their house after all of that is horrible. And it's because of you. Claire said in a normal tone, despite her need to accuse her daughter. No, Mom. Brad would have gotten the address eventually anyway. Heather said as if she heard the accusing tone. It's not like it was a secret or anything. Heather. Claire thought about countering her, then realized her daughter was right. They sat there in silence and waited to see how long they would have to sit there and wait. I don't think we're going to need to toss the ex-girlfriend into the mix. Officer Holman said and waved at the huge transcript. Most of this stuff they did before Brad started dating her. The bridge happened just before they broke up and the Strickland house break-in was afterwards. I agree. His partner said. I think we can also recommend Eric for leniency, since he's been goading them along quite nicely for us. Officer Holman chuckled. Never piss off your friends by humiliating them. It always comes back to bite you in the ass. His partner laughed. He took the girl too, so we know the guy's got balls. You gotta give him that. Agreed. Officer Holman said and nodded. The insurance agent came through with the proposal for the damages as well. Boy, oh boy, did she lowball the first estimate to get it approved, then she hit the company with the real estimate. His partner laughed again. She must like Ms. Strickland to get it pushed through in only one day. No doubt. Officer Holman said. She's quite the looker. Ha. His partner punched his arm. Someone else likes her, too. You saw her. Officer Holman said. 2 days without a shower, wearing old clothes, and upset about losing access to her house, and she still looked fantastic. You're just a sucker for a nice ass in a pair of jeans. His partner joked. Hey, don't knock the magic of denim. Officer Holman said and punched his shoulder. Come on. Let's get these yahoos processed properly. He said, and they got the help of a few officers and went into the conference room to handcuff them all, then informed them of the charges being laid against them. Great, just great. Eric said, and he was led away and brought to the separate holding cells they had. Once Eric was out of sight of the others, Officer Holman put a hand on his shoulder and directed him somewhere else. He brought him all the way back over to the squad room and opened the door to a small office. "Eric!" Heather yelled and jumped up from her chair, then she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him several times. "What's going on?" Claire asked. "Just a bit of role-playing," Officer Holman said and took the cuffs off of Eric's wrists. "You're not going to charge me?" Eric asked, completely surprised. "We're recommending leniency for you, since you weren't actually involved in either felony charge. The rest are misdemeanors and were committed, mostly, while you were underage." Heather didn't let Eric go as she looked at the officer. "Thank you. Your man did an excellent job wringing out all the details of the crimes committed by the others," Officer Holman said, and Heather preened proudly and he handed her back her phone. "We already copied all the data, so you can have this back," he said. "You're both free to go." "Thank you very much," Claire said as she stood up. "I appreciate this. I really do. Make sure to leave your contact information at the front desk," Officer Holman said and looked at Heather and Eric. "You two better keep your noses clean." "We promise," Heather said excitedly and kissed Eric again. "Let's get out of here before he changes his mind." She let his neck go, took his hand, and led him out of the small office. "Heather," Claire said and then sighed. "Goodbye, officer." "Ma'am." Officer Holman nodded to her and she walked quickly after her retreating daughter. Kenneth was in a bit of a daze as he sat in his den and talked to his wife. He had come home after being thoroughly trounced at golf, which was probably why his boss had invited him along, and he discovered that his daughter had returned home, with a guest. It was the mother of her boyfriend, and that wasn't the worst part. She was a great-looking blonde woman with a fantastic body and she would be staying with them for the foreseeable future. He wasn't sure if his mind could handle it. It was bad enough when his daughter had started to blossom and grew to be more womanly practically every day. He really missed his little girl and he wasn't sure how to properly handle the young woman she had become. He was grateful that she was modest and tried to keep herself covered up for the most part, and that protected his tender sensibilities. Now Kenneth was going to have a strange woman in his house, that he could potentially walk in on or see in a compromising position. She could also be in various states of dress and undress at any time. He wilted a little inside at the thought of embarrassing himself, his wife, and his daughter, if that ever happened. "Are you sure that she doesn't have any other family?" Kenneth asked as he tried again to find a reason to save himself from a ton of worry. "No, and she's already unpacked and settled in her room," Catherine said. "Her room?" Kenneth asked with wide eyes. "It's hers for as long as she needs it and you are just going to have to accept it," Catherine said and pat his hand. "On the plus side, our daughter isn't staying away for the summer. She'll be here in the house most of the time." Kenneth didn't have the heart to tell her that he was not looking forward to Kelly wearing smaller shorts and t-shirts. Not even a little bit. Then his mind went to Annie and the tight jeans she currently wore and he couldn't help it when he imagined her wearing tiny shorts and a little t-shirt to show off her body. He closed his eyes and ducked his head in defeat. "Thank you," Catherine said and gave him a hug and kissed his cheek. "Don't worry, I'll keep a lookout and warn you if anything untoward appears that might upset you." Kenneth sighed and turned to look at his wife and she kissed him once, then again. His wife's hand rubbed his chest and arm, then his thigh. "Catherine." "The door's locked," Catherine said. "But, we have a guest," Kenneth whispered. "Yes, we do," Catherine whispered back and gave him a sexy smile, then kissed him again. After his shower, Arnold only wore a towel for the rest of the evening and eventually closed his dorm room door when he saw that a lot of the girls had as well. A few of them still in the hallway had waved to him. When he did and he had waved back. He took off the towel and put on his sleep clothes, then went to bed. Arnold climbed out of bed when the alarm went off in the morning, made 4 pieces of toast for breakfast and drank a glass of orange juice, cleaned up, then dressed for work in a different color coordinated suit with appropriate shirt and socks combo to go with it. He hooked his key ring to his pants loop and opened his room door, then all of the activity in the hallway came to a stop. "Good morning," one of the young women said. "Good morning," Arnold said, and had to fight his conditioning of giving a quick kiss as he shut and locked the door. "Hi, Arnold," Emily said as she poked her head out of her room. "Hello," Arnold said to Emily and walked by her. "Hi, there." "Hello." "Morning." "Hey, sexy." "Hi." Arnold nodded and said hello to them in return, then made it to the end of the hallway and hit the button for the elevator. He waited for it to arrive and all of the activity in the hallway returned to normal when he stepped into the elevator. Quite a few of the girls waved and he gave them a little wave back as the doors closed. Arnold knew what was going to happen on the other floors and he stepped to the back of the elevator and waited. It stopped at each floor and a gaggle of girls came in. He couldn't tell if they were the same ones, since he wasn't keeping track of them, not that he could. He didn't know how many were on each floor and all he could do was count how many were in front of him. The elevator reached the ground floor and everyone piled out and he stepped out. "Hi, Arnold," Doris said loudly from behind her desk. "Enjoy your day at work." "I will," Arnold said and gave her a huge smile, because he knew it was going to be full of dissections. 108 dissections for that morning and he would be cleaning them all up afterwards. As far as he was concerned, it was going to be a great day. Doris was surprised at his bright angelic smile. Even though she was more than twice his age, in fact she was a little older than his own mother, she felt her body react to the attention. She didn't let it show on her face, though. She waved to him as he left the building and she wasn't surprised when a different pile of girls from the day before swarmed her to bombard her with questions about him. Arnold walked over to Building F and went inside, up the stairs, and went right into the lab to get to work. He had 36 setups to do with the appropriate tools and only a short time to do them. The professor said that he could even put out the specimens if he had the time before the students arrived for class, and he managed to complete the task just as the lab door opened. Professor Hamel-Krenslav was a little disappointed when Arnold hadn't shown up at his office for work. He knew it was probably Arnold's way of protesting not having the afternoon off the day before, so he didn't fault the boy for expressing his displeasure. He let out a sigh at all the work he would be doing by himself that morning, grabbed his teaching materials from his desk, and walked over to the lab. Hamel opened the door and was pleasantly shocked when he saw Arnold put the last prepped specimen in place. "Good man," he said and put his teaching materials on his desk. "You even have the displays for the lab workers in the middle of the table as the centerpieces. Excellent work." The lab door opened again and Amy strode in with Cicely at her side and the other lab workers behind them. "Professor, you have everything set up already?" Hamel shook his head and waved at Arnold. "I just arrived here myself." Amy's mouth opened a little in surprise and Cicely took the opportunity that presented and stuck her finger in her mouth. Amy gagged a little and Cicely laughed loudly as her hand was pushed away. "Gah! Hey!" Amy yelled. "Don't blame me," Cicely said. "I warned you if you opened your mouth and don't say anything, I'd fill it for you." "Ha ha. I didn't think you meant with your goddamn fingers," Amy protested and Cicely laughed harder. "All right, places everyone," Professor Hamel-Krenslav said and the 6 lab workers went to their assigned tables. Amy and Arnold went to the front of the lab and stood on either side of the professor's desk by the wall. They did it just in time, because in the next moment, the room was almost instantly filled with 30 young women and 6 young men. A lot of them didn't look happy to be there, except for a handful of them. "Arnold!" A few of them gasped when they saw him. "Hi, again. Hey, you're working here. We get to live with him and take Tuesday morning labs with him, too," one said with a laugh. I knew things were going to be interesting when he stripped for us last night. Amy's mouth dropped open and she stared at the girls and then at Arnold. Damn it, I'm too far away. Cicely said and the lab workers laughed. Settle down, please. Hamill said and turned to the whiteboard behind him and underlined the scientific name of the specimen the class was working on today. I know most of you don't really care what the thing in front of you is actually called. A few of the students nodded and a couple of them laughed. I'll only require that you remember the common name and for you to perform to the best of your ability. Hamill said and faced them again. Each table has a lab worker and a fully prepared specimen. Please use both as much as you need in order to complete the assignment. You only mean asking questions, right? A guy at Cicely's table asked with a laugh. Unless you enjoy the taste of a knuckle sandwich. Cicely said and nearly everyone laughed. Hey, she didn't curse at him. A girl said from the next table, shocked. Hamill let it go on for a few moments, then cleared his throat. You have just under an hour. Begin. You heard him, people. Get to work. Amy said and waited for everyone to start, then she made the rounds to check on them. Both Arnold and the professor stood at the front of the class and observed. Kelly had come into the spare room the night before after getting a call from Arnold, and she expressed her concern over Arnold's blatant overt behavior. Annie had reassured her that nothing would come of it, then reminded her that she had warned Kelly about needing to keep an eye on Arnold's lack of body sensitivity. The two of them had stayed up half the night talking and then had fallen asleep. Annie woke up in an unfamiliar bed and sighed. She turned her head and saw Kelly's disheveled hair and smiled. You miss him already and you just started living together. She thought and reached out to straighten the hair a little. I miss him, too. Kelly let out a sigh and opened her eyes. I'm sorry for bothering you like this. Annie chuckled. I should be saying that, considering I really didn't want to spend another night in a new place all alone. At least you didn't need a shower curtain on the bed to stay clean. Kelly said and Annie laughed. It was all I could think of, okay? Annie said in her defense. But, you're right. Sleeping in a bed that hasn't had 1,000 people on it is such a relief. You mean 1,000 people doing God knows what besides sleeping? Kelly joked and Annie groaned. Don't remind me. Annie said and sat up and looked at the time. It's pretty early still. We can sit here and wait for your parents to get up or we can go grab breakfast for ourselves. Definitely getting it for ourselves. Kelly said and sat up, too. Then again, we don't have to do anything today and we're not going anywhere. Everything is all mixed up and turned around now. Annie said and sighed. Come on. I need to practice making breakfast. A real breakfast. Kelly corrected and Annie nodded. They both stood up and left the spare room and went to the kitchen. Annie gave her tips as Kelly made breakfast. Kenneth smelled something good being cooked and climbed out of bed, rubbed his face to wake up, then left his bedroom and went to the kitchen. He was shocked when he didn't see his wife and stopped dead when he saw two barely dressed attractive women walking around his kitchen in little boy shorts and tiny t-shirts making breakfast. He quickly turned around and went right back to bed. The biology class worked for the entire hour, and Arnold had to step in and give a hand to a few of the students when they had trouble. He didn't know that they were only having trouble just so he would help them, though. It was a bit sneaky of them, but no harm was done to either Arnold or the specimen. When the hour was over, Amy spoke. If you haven't completed your specimen dissections, or believe that you haven't, you'll need to make an appointment with me to complete it on your own time. Are you kidding? One of the guys asked. The lab won't count against your course completion unless you finish it. Amy reminded him. You also can't move on to the next subject in class without it. Well, damn. He said. I need an appointment. Amy smiled. Meet me at the professor's desk and we'll set things up. Who will be doing the assists? One of the girls from Arnold's dorm asked. It depends on the time of day you make the appointment. Amy said. I have classes in the afternoons, so it'll be mornings and possibly the weekend for me. Then it's afternoons and evenings for Arnold? She asked and Amy nodded. I have 5th class off, so I want an appointment for then, please. Desk. Amy said and walked over to it, and she was surrounded by 10 students that needed to finish their specimens. Professor Krenslav walked over to Arnold and whispered. We need to clean and prep the desks again. I'll put the students' names on the specimens and the lab workers will help me put them away while you replace their tools. Sir. Arnold said and they got to work. By the end of the 10-minute break, Arnold had cleaned the tables and had replaced everything with fresh tools, then he put out the next series of specimens. He took the dirty tools to the back of the lab and set them all inside the sterilizer and turned it on. He would need them after the next class. Amy finished making the appointments just as the next class came into the lab and she was surprised that everything was already done. She looked over at Arnold, who was already back at the front of the lab, and his suit still looked fine and wasn't rumpled at all. The next class proceeded just like the last one and everything had to be reset for the third and final class that morning. More appointments were made as well, and Amy felt a little guilty that most of them wanted afternoon and evening appointments. Arnold is definitely earning his paycheck this week. Amy thought as the next class proceeded and Arnold did the same thing she was doing and walked around to offer advice and help to those that needed it. It wasn't strictly necessary for them to do that since the lab workers could handle it normally, but having an extra person or two around to ease the pressure was a big help for both the lab workers and the students. The class ended and only 3 appointments needed to be made for that afternoon. The lab was quickly cleaned up and all the specimens were marked with names of the students and stored away, then Arnold sterilized the tools and put them away. Holy shit! We're done before lunch. Cicely exclaimed and the other lab workers laughed. Yes, Miss Thomas. You and the others can go. Hamill said and waved at the door. Hey! Amy exclaimed as Cicely dragged her out of the lab. This morning went great. Diane commented as she and the others walked over to the door. I don't think we've ever had things go this smoothly. Hamill nodded and turned to look at Arnold. You can go eat, too. You have a few appointments this afternoon and this evening. Yes, sir. Arnold said and left the lab to go to the cafeteria. It was busy again and he waited in line, then the slightly overweight woman behind the counter saw him and smiled. Hey, hun. She said. What can I get for you today? The same. Arnold said and pointed. Really? She asked, shrugged, and gave him the same chicken breast pieces and a plate of French fries. It was green jello this time and she gave him that, too. He moved down the line to the register and the young woman gave him a big smile. She didn't ask if he wanted pop and just got it for him and took his money and gave him his change. Are you busy tonight? She asked. I have several appointments to help students work on their biology assignments. Ah, okay. She said. See you later. Arnold nodded and he walked towards the table where he had sat the day before. Arnold. We're over here today. Cicely said loudly and waved as she stood to get his attention. Her table was tucked into an alcove and Arnold walked over to her. You can sit right here beside me. Geez, Cicely. The redhead across the table said. Just because he's technically your boss, doesn't mean you should be sucking up to him all the time. Ha! Cicely barked a laugh. Believe me, he would know it if I was gonna suck on anything of his. Amy groaned on her other side and Cicely laughed. Don't worry, Farina. I won't even ask him if he'll let me jerk him off. Jerk me off? Arnold asked. Rub your magic lamp? Tug on your silly string? Tease your snake until it spits? Cicely asked and had everyone at the table and the next 2 tables laughing. Arnold just gave her a confused look. Oh. Arnold said. Does that count as sex? If you lick it or suck at all, definitely sex. The redhead said. Just the hand to get him off. It's just masturbation with assistance. Same. The blonde beside her said. It depends on what the purpose is. A black woman with dreadlocks said. If it's just for fun, then I'll go with masturbation, even if a mouth is involved. If you're intending it to be more than that, either right after or later, then you're trying for sex and it counts. That's a little more existential reasoning than the question needs. Cicely said eloquently, and the woman laughed. Next. Masturbation. Sex. Cicely looked at Amy. And what's your opinion? I abstain, since I'm his boss. Amy said and kept eating. Oh, don't be all prudish now. Cicely said. We all said what we think of having a dick in our hands. You didn't. Amy said. I was saving the best for last. Cicely grinned. So, spill it. What do you think? Amy looked around and they were all staring at her. Okay, fine. She said. It's just jerking him off and doesn't count, even if you lick and suck on it, because it's all for him and we don't really get anything out of it. She said. Your turn. I think it depends on whose hand it is. Cicely said, and they all looked at her with surprise on their faces. If it's just some girl, it shouldn't count. Like Farina said, it's just jerking off. If it's the hand of someone you care about, like a girlfriend or a lover, any contact like that counts as sex. Wow. The redhead across the table said. Who knew you were that deep emotionally? Arnold, what are you doing? Amy asked. Asking my girlfriend what she thinks. Arnold said and started texting. His phone beeped several times in a row and he typed back. Jesus Christ, he's crazy. The black woman with dreadlocks said. He's actually asking his girlfriend about it. You've got huge brass balls, Arnold. Cicely said and read the texts and smiled. Huge brass balls. What's she saying? The redhead asked and leaned over to read them upside down. Okay, wow. She said and looked at Arnold. Either she trusts you beyond all reason or she's the best girlfriend in the world. Kelly hasn't given me oral sex yet. Arnold said, which he understood was the qualifier for the best girlfriend, since both Heather and Claire had done that for him and qualified for it. Every single woman at the table gasped. They all looked at each other and exchanged various sad faces at Arnold having a girlfriend that wouldn't do that for him. Cicely was closest, so she put a hand on his arm. I'm sure she'll do that for you eventually. Only if she asks me for sex. Arnold said and put his cell phone away. I'll wait until then. You're waiting for your girlfriend to ask you for sex. Cicely said and he nodded. Where is she? She had to move back home and she won't be back until the fall. Arnold said and finished eating in complete silence. Everyone at the table watched him take his tray back to the counter and disperse its contents. When he walked out of the cafeteria, they all let out sad sighs. The poor guy. The redhead said. 3 months without sex would kill me. Everyone at the table nodded their heads in agreement, including Amy and Cicely. Arnold went back to the lab after eating and prepped for the appointments he had to help the students with finishing their class specimens. Amy had been industrious and booked several students, so Arnold had to prep 1 table and 3 place settings, check the appointment, then retrieve their assigned specimens. The first 3 students showed up and he spent the next 20 minutes assisting them. He gave them hints and showed them what they should be doing and how to do it, and the 3 young women appreciated his instruction. Word had spread a little about his casual dress when in the dorm and that made them more tolerant of his seemingly cold attitude, because they assumed he was like that only when working. They finished and he put their specimens away, put out 3 new place settings, and waited for the next appointment. When they showed up, he helped them, too. The rest of the afternoon went like this, with sometimes single and double appointments, and then the school day ended. The appointments didn't, however. He had more of them after supper, so he made a quick trip to the cafeteria to get something to eat. Back again. The woman behind the counter said and chuckled. The usual. Arnold nodded and she gave him chicken and fries, then he went to the register. You really are working tonight, right? The young woman asked and gave him his plastic cup of soda. My next appointment is in 20 minutes. Arnold said and paid for the meal, sat down at the table in the alcove, then brought the tray and plates back to the counter. See you tomorrow. Both the woman behind the counter and the girl at the register said. Arnold kept working for several more hours and all of the students managed to finish their specimens. He had fought his own instincts to take over from them and do it right all day. When the last student left, Arnold cleaned up and put the specimens away, checked off the appointments from the sheet on the professor's desk, then left the building to go back to the dorm. They really worked you hard today. Doris said when he came through the door, as if she knew exactly what he had been doing and when he would be back. Come here for your reward. Arnold walked over and she came around the desk to take him into a hug, then she kissed his cheek. You did a great job today. Doris said and ran her hand over the top of his head before she let him go. You keep that up and you'll be running the department someday. Arnold wasn't sure how to respond to that. Doris saw the odd expression on his face and nodded. Yes, that task is a bit too daunting for someone so young to think about, so don't worry about it for now. You just do your work, learn everything that you can, and be the best Arnold you can be. The best Arnold I can be? Arnold asked. There's only one of you, so only you can be the best you. Doris smiled. Get better at your job. Learn new skills. Have fun. I can't have fun. Kelly's not here. Arnold said and Doris nodded. Understanding. Well, I'm sure we can figure out something while she's gone. Doris said. I bet she'll want to hear from you after you go upstairs to your room. Okay. Arnold said and walked over to the elevator. He didn't notice that the lobby was empty, which meant nearly everyone was already upstairs and in their rooms. When he left the elevator on his floor, all of the doors were shut, except for the one near his own. When he used his key to open his door, he saw a brunette come out into the hallway. Hi, Arnold. Emily said. Hello. Long day, huh? Arnold nodded and went into his room, then shut his door. Damn it. Emily whispered and stepped back into her room and shut her door, too. The next 3 days at the college passed in a similar fashion to the day before. There were a lot of students taking biology as a prerequisite course, just over 400 in the entire college, and a good portion of them needed to make appointments to finish their specimens. Fortunately for Amy, none of them wanted morning or weekend appointments, which meant that they all wanted afternoon and evening appointments and Arnold got to do them all. By Friday at 4 o'clock, Amy was off for the weekend and Arnold still had 3 more appointments and 7 students to help. The bad part about Arnold working so hard all week was that he was needed to come in on Sunday to help the professor prepare for the next day. Since Hamill was teaching Arnold directly, Amy wasn't required to attend. For the first time in her life, Amy actually felt a little guilty about someone else doing all the work, even though as the second assistant, it was Arnold's job to lessen her workload. It wasn't the fact that he was doing it, what bothered her was that he did it without complaint or even suggested that he would complain about it. He did it all, everything she asked, and never questioned her decisions. Amy was actually shocked that he wasn't going behind her back and talking to anyone that would listen, about the massive workload he had been tasked with by both her and the professor. She had kept a close eye on Arnold's interactions with the professor as well. Even there, Arnold never mentioned being upset, being overworked, or even that he was unhappy with her or the situation. Arnold stayed quiet and did his work and that was that. It kind of unnerved Amy, because everyone would make some kind of complaint at some point, even about some little thing that didn't matter, just because they could, and he never did. Not once during the week, or when she told him that he needed to work Sunday, did he say no or that he was too busy. Not once. Amy sat on Cicely's couch and sipped on a beer as she thought about everything and wondered if there was anything she could do about it. Do I want to do anything about it? She asked herself. This last week has been great for me. Lots of time off, no extracurricular work, and no deadlines to meet. She thought. The only problem I have, really, is Arnold. Huh? What? Amy blinked her eyes and looked at her. Hello. Earth to Farina. Come in, Farina. You're spacing out. No. Cicely said loudly. Maxine laughed. Houston. We have a loopy space cadet. Request permission for revival. Deploy water cannons. Cicely said, and both she and Maxine shook their beer cans slightly. Fire. The three of them laughed and drank the last of their beers, and Maxine went to the refrigerator to get 3 more and handed them to her friends. Thanks. Amy and Cicely said, and the 3 of them popped the beers open and took a drink. Now that you're calmed down, tell us what's got your panties in a twist. Cicely said. It's nothing. Amy said. I just opened this beer. Don't make me throw it at you already. Cicely took a big swig of it and emptied half of it. There. I can throw it now. She said and hefted it up to throw it at her forehead. Okay. Okay. Amy said and held a hand up to block the shot, in case Cicely really did throw it. I don't need a headache before getting drunk. Cicely nodded and took a normal drink as she waited for her friend to tell her what was bothering her. It's about Arnold. Amy said. Oh, that poor bastard. Cicely said. He's working his ass off to support his mother, doesn't have a house to go home to, and can't get laid because his girlfriend moved away. What? Amy looked at her. What did you say? He's got to have a serious case of blue balls. Cicely started to say. No, no. About not having a home to go back to. Amy nearly yelled. One of the girls at my work table today told me about it. She said she was there when he got the news a few days ago. Oh, my God. Amy said as the guilt started to drag her down and she gripped her beer can tightly. What is it? Cicely said in a serious tone and moved closer. Farina, tell me. You're right. He has been working hard all week and he even did all those appointments in the evenings. Amy said, her voice had a touch of sadness. He's still doing them, actually. Yeah, and? He's not complaining about it. Amy said and took a drink. No matter what the professor and I ask him to do, he does it without question. Is he doing it half-assed? Maxine asked and took a drink of beer. No, he's doing it perfectly. Amy said and took another drink. Then what's the problem? Cicely asked and drank. Amy gave her a deadly look. What did you say 2 weeks ago when I asked you to help me clear out the old specimens? Yes, and what did you do the entire time we were doing it? Amy asked. I was helping, of course. You. Ha. Cicely said and took another drink to finish off her beer. Damn, I need another one. Here. Maxine said and handed over her beer. I'll get new ones. Thanks. Cicely said and took a drink. Ah. Good stuff. Cicely, he doesn't complain and stays quiet. He doesn't grunt, or moan, or make odd noises when working. He does it all silently and never says anything even close to a complaint. He does all the physical stuff in the lab, by himself, and he's so damn efficient that he has everything ready before I'm ready for it. Somebody sounds jealous. Maxine said and came back with 3 cans of beer and put them on the coffee table. I'm not jealous. I'm unnerved. Yes. His work ethic is great. No, it's fantastic like the professor said. It's just, if I wasn't there to see him working, you could almost say he was doing magic. Like that first morning when he surprised the professor by having everything done before we got there. Cicely said, and Amy nodded. The professor told me later that he was disappointed when he thought Arnold was late, and then found out he had come in early to get the work done and was delighted. Amy said. Yep, you're definitely jealous. Maxine said. No, it's more like, a jilted lover. Cicely said. She's being replaced in the eyes of the professor as his favorite and she doesn't know how to handle it. That's not true. Amy said, unconvincingly. He's just impressed that Arnold is working out so well as a part of the department, considering he just started. Aha. Cicely said and finished off her beer and took a new one from the coffee table. So, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? Amy asked. He really does fit in well and everybody likes him. No wonder. Maxine said. Have you seen some of the photos of him floating around? What photos? Cicely and Amy asked at the same time. You two need to get your heads out of your asses and look around sometimes. Maxine grinned. Shut your cake hole. Cicely said and took another drink. I think the alcohol is affecting your brain already. Maxine said and took out her cell phone. That was a horrible comeback, even for you. Yeah. Cicely looked at the beer can in her hands. You kill brain cells and I love you anyway. Maxine chuckled and handed her the phone. Look at the Adonis in pose. Lemme see. Amy said and leaned over Cicely's shoulder. No, it's not real. Is it real? Yeah. Maxine said. The video is even better. There's video. Amy and Cicely yelled and Maxine laughed as she took the phone back and brought up the video, hit play, then handed it back to Cicely. Feast your eyes on the spectacular. Amy and Cicely sat there in silence and watched Arnold as he stripped in front of a hallway full of women. Kelly had been shaken when she received a text in the middle of the day from Arnold and he asked her what her views were on jerking someone off. Luckily, Annie was right there and saw Kelly's reaction and took the phone. I got this. Annie said and typed the responses needed to keep Arnold's behavior in check. She put the phone down and rubbed Kelly's back. It's okay. He's not doing it. It was just a discussion over lunch with the lab workers. Oh, thank God. Kelly sighed. What a thing to talk about out of the blue. Annie chuckled. You thought he was in the middle of something, didn't you? Kelly nodded. You know the restrictions you gave him. He's not going to do anything without telling you. Kelly sighed. I almost don't want to know, you know. Annie laughed. You think I do? He's my son. Kelly opened her mouth, looked at the phone where Annie had just discussed masturbation, then laughed. Okay, you got me there. She said and took her hand. Thanks for doing that for me. What are friends for? Annie asked. Now we need to talk about what we are going to do on the weekend. She said. There's no chance that the house will be done by then. I doubt Mom will be as accommodating if I ask Arnold to stay here, too. Kelly said. Should I book a hotel for 2 days? Annie asked. An actual hotel, I mean, not the flea circus I first stayed in. You should only need it for 1 night, unless you want access to the room first thing in the morning on Saturday, then you'll need it for 2 nights. No, it'll be 3 nights if Arnold stays to get the last bus on Sunday. That's going to cut into my spending money. I also need groceries. Annie started to say and Kelly squeezed her hand. Let's leave the decision until Friday, then we can worry about what to do. Kelly said. They waited the 3 days and were lucky they had, because Arnold called and said that he needed to work on Sunday. Annie and Kelly were both relieved that he wasn't coming to visit, since it deferred their problems for another week, then they were sad that they wouldn't see him for just as long. They told him to be good and to stay safe, that they missed him, and they would see him next weekend even if they had to go there to do it. Arnold woke up on Saturday morning and climbed out of bed. He didn't have to work, so he didn't have to get dressed, either. When he opened his room door while only wearing a pair of shorts, he saw that the hallway was the same as it was during the week. A bunch of girls were hanging out near their doorways and talking, half naked like always, except that none of the girls had anywhere they needed to go and were in no rush to change that. Hi. Hey, there. Morning, Arnold. Most of them said at the same time. A few of them waved and he said hello and waved back. Are you going anywhere for the weekend? One of them asked. I have work tomorrow. Arnold said. Oh, that sucks. She said. Only one day off all week. I'd be pissed. I like my work. Arnold said. Well, that's a relief. Emily said as she came out of her room. She only wore a pair of panties and a bra in the hopes to gain his attention. I hope they pay you well. Arnold shrugged, because he didn't have any other job to make a comparison in pay except for working for Claire. Do you have any plans for today? Emily asked. No. Arnold said. That's going to be boring sitting around the dorm all day, isn't it? Emily asked. Arnold thought about it and nodded, then he walked back inside his dorm room and over to where he had put his cell phone beside his bed and dialed the register girl. Hi. I'm going to be bored today. Yes. Okay. Emily's mouth dropped open in shock as Arnold made a date with someone else right in front of her, pulled off his sleeping shorts, then he grabbed a pair of jeans that were fairly tight and put them on. He picked up a bright blue sleeveless t-shirt and pulled it on, which left his arms completely bare, and he grabbed his keys and hooked them to the belt loop on his jeans. He walked over to his open door and stepped out, locked and closed it, then walked down the hallway. Arnold walked the obstacle course that was the hallway and a few of the girls admired his muscular arms. They had seen them from far away and had seen the photos and videos, but it just wasn't the same as seeing them up close. They appreciated that he wasn't big and bulky like the guys that overdid things like that. Looking good, Arnold. One girl said as he passed. Arnold turned his head and saw that she only wore a man's shirt, completely unbuttoned, and it showed off quite a lot of her chest and a tiny little pair of panties that barely covered her. I can only have sex with my girlfriend. Arnold said and hit the button for the elevator. What? She looked a little stunned and a few of the girls around her chuckled. Arnold looked at her chest and then at her face. You're showing too much of yourself to me on purpose for it to not be an invitation for sex. He said. Do you want to have sex with me? The girl blushed deeply. I mean. Paula. The young woman grabbed the shirt and pulled it closed, just as the elevator arrived. You see. She's covered and was only teasing you. You weren't going to see it all. Paula laughed and gave him a little wave. See you later. Arnold waved back and stepped into the elevator. I can't believe you did that to me. The girl said loudly as she whirled around to glare at her friend, who laughed as the elevator doors closed. Arnold rode the elevator down to the ground floor and stepped out into the lobby. Hi, Arnold. Doris said. Where are you headed? The physical education building. Arnold said. Angela, the girl at the cafeteria register, said to call her when I was bored and I'm meeting her there. I thought you said you couldn't date anyone else. Doris asked. We're just hanging out. Arnold said. Okay. Doris said. When you get there, ask her. If she says it's a date, come right back here. Okay. Arnold said and left the dorm building and walked over to the physical education building. He went inside and saw the register girl as she stood beside the stairs. Hi. Angela said and waved. Hello. Arnold said. Is this a date? Nope. We're just hanging out. Angela said and then smiled. And working out a little. I could use a spotter for some of my exercises and thought you could help me. Okay. Arnold said, and she turned and walked up the stairs. He followed her up the stairs, and if he bothered to notice such things, the workout pants she wore were like a second skin and you couldn't see a trace of a panty line anywhere. He's totally checking out my butt. Angela thought and looked back to see him staring at her face. Oops. She turned back around and kept walking up the stairs. He caught me looking. Arnold followed her to the second floor and over to a huge rack of free weights. I usually only do 10 pounds at 30 reps each. Angela said and grabbed the weights, then sat down and did the first set of 10, rested for a few moments, then continued. Why don't you try them? Arnold looked at them and wasn't sure what ones to try. Do you need any help? A very attractive woman with short dirty blonde hair asked as she came over. I've never done this before. Arnold said. Well, by the looks of your arms, you should start with the 20-pound ones. The woman beamed a smile at him and looked forward to helping him when he struggled. I'll show you the proper way to lift them so that you don't hurt yourself. Arnold picked them up and sat down at the bench beside Angela, and the instructor showed Arnold exactly how to do the proper exercise. He did the 30 reps easily and she was a little dismayed as she told him to try the next higher weight. Make sure you tell me when your arms are feeling the strain. The instructor said in a sweet voice. Damn it. She's totally stealing my bit. Angela thought angrily and stopped it from showing on her face. Are you feeling any tension in your muscles now? The instructor asked, a little perturbed. Yes. Arnold said in a normal voice as he lifted 50-pound dumbbells in each hand. The instructor put her hands on one of his biceps and felt the muscle strain. If I'm gauging this right, he's not straining himself. She thought. Do you do normal regular exercise? No. Arnold said. How did you get all these muscles? She asked, curious. I used to shovel every day. Arnold said. Shovel, wait, you mean dirt? You shoveled dirt every day? For how long? Since I was 6. Arnold said, not understanding that she wanted a time each day. I'll be 19 in August. 13 years. She said, completely stunned. You've been doing a full body workout every day for 13 years. I haven't done it in a few weeks. Arnold said and put the weights back on the rack. You're barely sweating. She said as she looked at the small wet spot on the chest of his bright blue sleeveless t-shirt. I think we can move to the treadmill now. Angela said and put her own weights down. I'd rather see him on the leg press. The instructor said and guided them over to the large workout machines. Those jeans won't be good for doing this exercise, though. Arnold popped the jeans open and started to slide them off. W8. The instructor said and caught his hands. I'll be right back with some shorts. Okay. Arnold said and waited. Angela let out a nervous laugh. Good job scaring her off. Arnold didn't say anything and the instructor came back with a pair of women's shorts. I'm sorry, I just grabbed the first pair that. She stopped talking when Arnold took off his jeans and folded them up, then he took the women's shorts from her and put them on. Okay. It's this machine right here. She said and pointed. Arnold put his jeans down beside the machine and listened as she told him how to work it, how to attach the weights, and about the handheld safety lever to stop the weights from sliding all the way down if they start to slip. Let's start with some light weight. She said and told Arnold to put 2 of the 50-pound weights on each side. That's not light. Angela whispered because of the 200 pounds of weight. Light for him. She clarified and Arnold sat down and leaned back, almost vertical, then he braced himself and planted his feet on the movable platform. He released the safety lever and pushed with his feet. The machine almost jumped away from him. Definitely too light. Hook it, please. The instructor said. Okay, maybe twice that. Arnold added 2 more of the 50-pound weights on each side, resumed his place, then did it again. Are you feeling the strain now? The instructor asked and touched his thigh as the muscles contracted. Yes. Arnold said, and he did the full 30 reps. It was a lot different than shoveling dirt, and he wasn't sure if he liked it, because he was so used to doing different movements. The women's shorts he wore billowed out each time he lifted the weight and did a repetition, so both the instructor and Angela were getting great views about every 2 seconds. Oh. The full body press next. The instructor said and pointed to a machine not too far away. I think Arnold has had enough of heavy weights for now. Angela said, a little angry. This was only supposed to be a light workout and not a full power lifting session. He came here wearing jeans, not spandex tights. The instructor was a little shaken from her hostility. I was just. You were enjoying yourself by pushing Arnold to see how much he could do. Angela said, and the instructor caught her breath. I was okay with that for a while, until you gave him 400 pounds to leg press. She said. 400. Can you do 400? No, I'm trying to stay slim. Then what makes you think Arnold wants to bulk up by lifting heavy weights? Angela asked, and the instructor didn't have an answer for her. Did you even think about what Arnold wants to do? She asked. No, right? You were too caught up in your own little fantasy. I wasn't. I just. The instructor started to say, then she sighed. All right, yes. I want to test him on everything I can. I've never met a natural muscle man before. A what? Angela and Arnold asked at the same time. He's developed finely toned and quite strong muscles by performing the same task for years. He wasn't trying to develop muscles or tried to get strong on purpose. It just happened. She said and looked at Arnold. I'm right, aren't I? You didn't realize that you had become strong and muscled after years of doing the best natural workout that ever existed. Arnold looked down at his arms and legs, and the muscles and veins were popping from exertion. Personally, I think the way you look now, with your muscles ripped like they are, is the sexiest thing I've ever seen. The instructor said, and her face flushed red. If you weren't here with your girlfriend, I would be very tempted to ask you out myself. She's not my girlfriend, and this isn't a date. Arnold said. Will you go out with me? The instructor asked. Please say yes. I have an exclusive girlfriend. Arnold said. She took a deep breath and let it out. I should have known you would be too good to be true. She said with a sad smile and picked up his jeans. I'd like my shorts back, please. Your shorts? Angela asked before she could stop herself. Do you see a clothing store anywhere around here? The instructor asked with a wave of her hand. Arnold took off the shorts and handed them to her, then he pulled on his jeans. It was nice to finally meet someone like you. The instructor said. I'm sorry if I wasted your time. She said and walked away. Wow, she actually made me feel bad about not letting her get her way. Angela said and chuckled. Come on. Let's go try the treadmill. Arnold followed her over to the treadmill, and she used the machine to set a jogging pace. Not too fast and not too slow. Arnold copied her on the next machine, and they stared to jog side by side. Usually, people do this, outside. Angela said between breaths. On a track, or on the street, but, that can be dangerous, with traffic and other people. So, people come here, to jog. Why? Arnold asked. Unlike Angela, the pace she set was too low to get his cardio up past the normal level. To meet, to stay in shape, to feel good about themselves, lots of reasons. Angela said, then she fell silent as she jogged. She hadn't done it in a while and her endurance was pretty low after sitting on her ass behind the cash register every day in the cafeteria. She was lucky and had the weekends off, so she usually relaxed and didn't bother exercising, which she had been neglecting for a while. When Arnold called, she thought it would be the perfect bonding opportunity. It was too bad for her that Arnold didn't see it that way. He thought it was pointless to run in place. You weren't going anywhere or accomplishing anything, except making yourself tired and sweaty. He wasn't against being tired or sweaty, since he had been like that a lot during his life. It was just that he didn't see the point if the reasons Angela gave could be done somewhere else. They jogged for 10 minutes and Angela couldn't do any more. She stopped and grabbed a towel from a nearby rack and wiped off her machine, then dabbed at her forehead and her neck. Arnold copied her, except that he didn't really need to wipe himself or the machine off. He hadn't worked up a sweat like Angela did. "Can you get me some water, please?" Angela asked. Arnold walked over to the counter and asked for water. He paid the clerk for one bottle and went back over to Angela and gave it to her. She took it gratefully and took a big drink from it, then sighed. "I am definitely out of shape," Angela said and wiped at her forehead. "I think I better keep myself to a walking pace for a while," she said and stood up. "Let's go for a walk around the track." Angela led Arnold over to the walking track and as they walked around it, she asked him questions about work and made idle chit-chat about her own work and her hobbies. Arnold didn't bother trying to remember it all. After an hour, they stopped walking and stood near the stairs. "Are you going to get something to eat for lunch?" Angela blurted out. "It's not lunch time yet," Arnold said. "Oh. Yes, you're right," Angela said, and she was at a bit of a loss as to what to do next. She racked her brain as she tried to think of some activity to do for the couple of hours that they had before it was time for lunch. "Well, I guess, you should go back to your dorm room," she said, because she didn't know that Arnold didn't care if they did absolutely nothing. "Okay," Arnold said and started to walk away. "See you," Angela said loudly and watched as he went down the stairs. "I had hoped he would invite me over or something." "You struck out, too," the instructor said from behind her. "Yeah," Angela said as she turned her head to look at the instructor, then she sighed. "You almost ruined my attempt." The instructor chuckled. "He seems pretty loyal, even if you did trick him into a date." "We were just hanging out," Angela said with a smile. "And I was just instructing him on exercises," she responded, then they both laughed. Doris had just finished talking to one of her girls when Arnold came into the dorm building. "It looks like you didn't work up much of a sweat. What did you do?" "I tried dumbbells, a leg press machine, jogged on a treadmill, and walked for an hour," Arnold said and Doris nodded. That was exactly what she had heard. "Did you meet anyone interesting?" Doris asked. "No," Arnold said and hit the button for the elevator. "You didn't?" Doris asked, a little surprised. "No," Arnold said and stepped into the elevator. Doris gave him a wave as the doors shut. "Chrissy, I thought you said Cheryl was there today." "She was," Chrissy said. "She was helping him on the weights and the leg machine." "Huh," Doris said and smiled. "Thank you for checking for me. You covered for me by calling me in sick when my boyfriend showed up to surprise me," Chrissy said and gave her a big smile. "That's worth some running around and keeping an eye on your favorite guy." Doris laughed and her chest jiggled, then she picked up an open box of chocolates and held it out to her. "Get your butt back upstairs." Oh. "Thanks," Chrissy said and took a chocolate and popped it into her mouth and ate it. "You always buy the best chocolates." Doris grinned. "Go ahead and take another." "You're the best," Chrissy said and took another. This one she ate slowly and went up the stairs. It wasn't worth waiting for the elevator to go up only one floor. Arnold walked out of the elevator and was greeted by the same scene he had passed earlier. He didn't ask the girls why they tended to gather in the hallway to talk, and he wasn't curious about it either. He accepted it as normal, since it was always like that. "Hi, Arnold. Did you work out some?" one of the girls asked, and he nodded. Of course, that got everyone's attention and they all saw his arms were popping and a few really liked the sight. They said hello and waved, and he returned the same greetings. Then he reached the end of the hallway and opened his dorm room door. He left it open like everyone else and he pulled off his t-shirt and tossed it into the laundry basket. "Hey, he's doing it again." One of the girls whispered to her roommate and took out her cell phone to start recording. "Oh, there goes the jeans," she said, almost in a moan as Arnold bent over. "Look at that butt." Her roommate laughed softly because everyone in the hallway watched Arnold undress. "His girlfriend is a pretty lucky GO, my God." Arnold's underwear quickly followed the jeans into the laundry basket and he walked over to the bathroom, completely naked. Then he turned around to shut the bathroom door, and gave everyone a great view of his front. Every single girl blushed at the sight. "Very, very lucky," the roommate said, and they all nodded. Arnold stepped out of the shower 15 minutes later and dried off, wrapped the towel around his waist, and opened the bathroom door. 6 young women were jostling for the front position just outside of his door. "Hi," the one in front said when she saw him, and everyone stopped trying to push her out of the way to get in front. "I'm going to watch some television and relax on the couch. Want to join me? I thought we agreed to make the offer together," one of the girls in behind said. "We're not all going to fit on my couch," the girl in front said. "One of you can and the rest can sit on my bed." "Okay," the other 5 girls said. "So, how about it?" the young woman in front said to Arnold. "You have to work tomorrow, so a nice day of relaxing on a couch should be just right for you." "Okay," Arnold said, and walked over to his dresser and grabbed a clean pair of underwear. One of the girls took out her cell phone and the one in front pushed it away. "Not now," she said, and turned to watch Arnold as he pulled off the towel and put on his underwear. He grabbed a normal white t-shirt and a pair of black shorts that stopped at mid-thigh and put them on as well. He grabbed his keys and cell phone from his jeans and walked over to the door. The 6 girls scrambled to get out of his way and he shut and locked the door. Arnold didn't have a belt loop to hook the keys to, so he held them in his hand and put his phone in his pocket. He followed the girls down the hall to a doorway about halfway towards the elevator. Inside was a nice-sized room with a bed, a couch, a small refrigerator, and a huge television on the wall. He stared at it and the girl who owned it smiled. "I watch a lot of television," she said, and sat down on the couch. Then she pat the spot next to her. Arnold took the cue and sat a bit away from her, to her brief disappointment. Then he laid down on his back and rested his head on her lap. All 6 young women caught their breath. Then there was a brief heated argument among the other 5 over who got to sit under his feet. "Take turns, for God's sake," the girl with Arnold's head on her lap said, and turned on the television. "I swear, they can't control their impulses sometimes," she said with a chuckle, and put it on a channel that played romance movies all the time. When Arnold didn't protest or say that he wanted to watch something else, she left it there. A girl lifted his feet briefly and slid onto the couch to sit under them and let them rest on her lap. Now that the television was on, Arnold watched it and his breathing started to slow down as he took long and even breaths. The other girls sat on the bed nearby and there were a couple of them in the hallway that took pictures and video. The girl at his feet couldn't help herself and started to gently stroke his calves. The girl whose lap held his head saw her and raised her eyebrows. Then she smiled and looked down at Arnold's calm face. His girlfriend really is lucky if he does this for her, she thought, and envy burned inside of her. She didn't let that rule her actions, though. She resisted the urge to pet his head, even though his blonde buzzcut begged her to rub it. She was also very tempted to bend over a bit more and kiss him. She wasn't sure if she was turned on more by the way he had used her as a pillow and relaxed or by the fact that she thought he was gorgeous. The other girls took turns sitting under Arnold's legs and rubbing them, and they all sat there and watched Arnold while he watched television. Of course, he wasn't actually watching it. He had zoned out like he always did and stared blankly at the screen. They all stayed there until lunch time, when someone in the hall mentioned getting food for lunch. Ah, damn it. The girl whose lap Arnold was using as a pillow whispered as Arnold stirred. Lunch time, Arnold said and looked up at her. She nodded and he rolled slightly and sat up. Ah. I just sat down, the girl on the end of the couch said. Arnold ignored her and stood up, stretched and delighted everyone that was looking at him. Then he walked out of the room and went to his dorm room to get dressed in his casual clothes. He put on a shirt and left it unbuttoned except for the cuffs, took off his shorts and grabbed another pair of jeans. They were loose-fitting and he used a belt to hold them up, put his cell phone in the pocket and hooked his keys to the belt loop. Arnold grabbed his wallet from the dresser drawer and saw the pile of takeout menus on the kitchenette table, and the Chinese food place was on top. When he left the dorm room and locked the door, the brunette next door stood there in a strapless bra and high-hip underwear. "Hi, Arnold. Where are you going?" Emily asked. "To eat lunch," Arnold said and walked by her. "What?" Emily asked, a little confused. She expected a destination, not what he was doing. "Chinese food," Arnold responded and walked down the hallway. "Want some company?" one of the half-naked young women asked when he reached the elevator. "You aren't dressed to go out," Arnold said and pushed the button for the elevator. "Gigi, give me 10 minutes," she exclaimed and ran back to her dorm room and went inside. "Ha! More like half an hour," one of the other girls said and looked at Arnold. "Are you waiting for her?" "No," Arnold said, and the elevator opened. "I'll be back before she's ready." "Oh. Is the place that close?" she asked. "It's a 10-minute walk from here," Arnold said and stepped into the elevator. She put her hand into the door of the elevator and caught the closing mechanism. "There's a good Chinese place that close to the campus?" she asked, completely surprised. "Yes," Arnold said. "I want to try it," she said. "Me, too." "Me. I'll go. Let's all go." "Arnold, I promise that in 10 minutes, a lot of us will be ready. Will you please wait for us and we can all go with you?" She felt that he was going to say no with such a feeble plea, so she used her trump card. "I'm just a girl that doesn't know much about the area," she lied. "Please wait and show me where the restaurant is." Arnold stepped back out of the elevator and she beamed a smile at him and touched his arm briefly, then she whipped around and looked at everyone. 10 minutes or you'll be left behind," she said, and ducked into her room and shut the door. "Oh, shit!" a few of them exclaimed, and nearly everyone else disappeared into their rooms and their doors slammed shut. It was eerily quiet in the hallway with only Arnold and 2 other girls. Arnold made eye contact with them and one of them shrugged. "I'd like to go, but I don't like Chinese food," she said as an explanation, then she poked the other girl with an elbow. "I'm not like the others. I can see what you're doing. You're playing us all off each other to see who you can seduce later." The second girl scoffed. "Unlike them, I'm not swayed by your great body or your easygoing attitude." "You're not swayed by his great body?" Her friend laughed. "I think someone is lying through her teeth. He could be a complete asshole and none of you are even concerned about it," the second girl said as she looked at her friend. "He could be a rapist, or even a serial killer, and he could be planning to do us all or kill us all in our sleep. Or both." "Janet," her friend yelled. "That's a horrible thing to say." Especially to his face. I didn't say it to his face. Janet said in her defense. He's right there. He can hear you. Her friend said and pointed. Use some common sense, you idiot. If he was anything like what you just said he was, who do you think will be the first one he gets rid of, huh? Janet gasped and turned her head to look at Arnold, who stood there by the elevator and stared at her. I'm sorry. I misspoke. I don't think you're a serial killer. I was only saying odd things that came to my mind and it just slipped out. It's not what I think at all. It's not. Janet said loudly. It was just a possibility that you could be. By that reasoning, he could be a superhero with a secret identity and he's just wasting time here while he fights crime at night or on the weekends. Her friend said and shook her head. I didn't think you would automatically assume the worst of people. I don't. Janet said. I really did just blurt that out. She said with a red face from embarrassment. I didn't mean it. Not really. She looked at Arnold. I'm sorry I said those things about you. Arnold didn't say anything and counted in his head. When he reached 10 minutes, he reached over and pushed the button for the elevator. It took a minute for the elevator to ding and the doors opened, just as several of the dorm room doors. We made it. The one that asked Arnold to wait said, slightly out of breath, and she walked over to the elevator with her roommate and 6 other girls from other rooms. Phew. I've never gotten ready that fast before. You should have skipped the concealer. Her roommate said with a smile as they all stepped inside the elevator with Arnold. Bite your tongue. She responded, then they both laughed. I think I have my skirt on backwards. One of the others said and that made a few of them laugh. Wait. A girl jumped out of her room with a pair of jeans in her hand and ran towards the elevator. Should we? One asked. Another 5 seconds won't hurt. Another said. The one by the buttons hit the door open button to keep them open. Thanks. The last girl said and moved off to the side and stepped into her jeans. The damn clasp on my bra broke and I had to get another one. Hey. Another girl said and hopped out of her room with her legs caught in her pants and a half-buttoned blouse. Hold the elevator. Sorry. We can't wait. The one by the button said and hit the door close button. The girl in the hallway tried to hop towards them, tripped and fell on the floor, then she looked up at them. No. She said and reached towards the elevator with a forlorn expression on her face. Bye. A couple of the girls waved to her as the elevator doors closed. I feel bad that we had to do that. The one at the button said. We couldn't make Arnold wait longer than we said. The first girl said. I would want you to leave me behind if I had been late, too. The other girls looked at her and she laughed. Yes, really. She said. But, we made it, so we better enjoy it on behalf of everyone else that didn't. All of the girls nodded their heads and the elevator stopped at the next floor and the girls in front held their hands up. Sorry, we're full. They said together and the one next to the buttons hit the door close button before the girls waiting in the hall could react. That was close. One of them said in relief and a low chuckle came from the others. They made it to the lobby without stopping again and Doris had a surprised look on her face when Arnold stepped out of the elevator with 8 girls around him. Arnold, what's going on? Doris asked, slightly concerned. I'm going to eat lunch at a Chinese restaurant. Arnold said. And the girls? I'm showing them where it is. Arnold responded. Doris nodded. She couldn't tell him to ask them if they thought it was a date, not in front of them, then she laughed mentally at the thought. Would any of them think it's a date with so many others around? She asked herself. I'll see you when you get back. Arnold left the dorm building with 8 nicely dressed and attractive women around him. They all started talking about different things and a couple of them talked to him and asked him questions. He answered them frankly, as he always did, and they found out a lot about him for the 10-minute walk to the restaurant. Surprisingly, the group of loudly talking girls with a single guy in the middle didn't get a lot of attention either on or off the campus grounds, even being in the large group that they were. They entered the restaurant and the man behind the counter laughed at their appearance in the restaurant. He did not appear to be Chinese or even Asian, which was odd for a Chinese restaurant. "You're lucky we have large party booths over there," he said and pointed to the side of the room. "Great," a few of the girls said loudly and immediately walked over there. "I'll bring the menus over in a minute," the man said, and the rest of the girls guided Arnold over to the booth and had him sit in the middle, then they sat around him. They didn't even argue about who was allowed to sit beside him, because they didn't want him to think that they were that petty. The menus were delivered and the man took their drink orders. It was mostly diet soda and a few glasses of water, and Arnold asked for root beer. The man was back 5 minutes later with a tray of drinks, then left and came back with another tray and served them all. "I'll give you a few minutes to decide what you want to eat," the man said and walked away. The girls all talked loudly about all the good things on the menu and about what they wanted. By the time the man came back, they had all decided and placed their orders. Arnold ordered the rice and chicken ball platter and the man left to fill their orders. The food was served and they all ate and talked about, well, everything. Arnold didn't try to follow along with the 6 different conversations going on around him, or wonder how there could be 6 conversations with only 8 people. He ate his food and answered questions when they asked him. They all finished eating and pushed their plates away to show that they were done. "This place really is great," the first girl said and reached over the girl between her and Arnold to put her hand on his. "Thank you for showing us where it is." Arnold nodded and the man behind the counter came over with the check. "Here you go, fella." The man chuckled and handed it to Arnold. "Don't die of shock when you see it." Arnold opened the little folder and saw the total. It wasn't that much more than when he had taken his friends out after prom. He took out his wallet and counted out the bills that were just over the right amount, put them in the folder, and handed it back. "Not much of a tipper on such a big order," the man said, and then his eyes widened as Arnold held out $40 to him. "Thanks, fella. Thanks a lot," he said and accepted the generous tip. The girls around him were stunned. Completely and utterly stunned. They had essentially forced Arnold to bring them along while he had lunch and they had fully intended to pay for their own meals. Now they were at a loss for words because he had paid for everything. He didn't ask them to split the check or to even pitch in on it, and it rendered them all speechless. "You ladies and gentlemen have yourselves a great day," the man that served them said and bowed. The girls took the cue to leave and they all shuffled out of the booth towards the door and Arnold followed them. "Wait," the man said, and they all stopped just before opening the door. "I almost forgot to give you your fortune cookies." He laughed and went behind the counter and grabbed several handfuls of them, much more than the 9 people in front of him, and put them in a paper bag. "Here you go," he said and walked over to Arnold and gave him the bag. "Hand those out later." Arnold nodded and they all left the restaurant. The girls stayed quiet for the entire walk back to the dorm building and Arnold led them inside. He walked over to Doris and opened the paper bag. "Fortune cookies," Arnold said, and Doris reached in and took one of them. "Thank you," Doris said, and Arnold walked over to the elevator and pushed the button. It opened immediately and he and the 8 girls with him stepped inside. Doris opened the fortune cookie and read it. "Be wary of those around you." She read silently and watched the doors to the elevator close. "Yes, but who?" she asked herself and ate the cookie. The elevator went right up to the top floor and Arnold stepped out first and held the open bag for them. "Thank you for lunch," the first girl said sincerely and with a slightly red face as she reached into the bag and took a fortune cookie. Then each girl stepped out of the elevator in turn and took a fortune cookie and thanked him, too. The other girls in the hallway were surprised by this, since it was odd to thank someone like that when all you did was go along. When the last girl passed, Arnold counted the cookies left and went to each girl that hadn't been able to go and let them take one as well. Some thanked him and others just took it, since they had missed out on the meal and were upset about it. Even Janet took one and she apologized again for what she said. Arnold didn't respond and went to Emily's door. She sat on the chair by her desk and looked like she was doing homework. She still wore the same strapless bra and high-hip panties, too. He knocked on her door frame and she startled slightly and looked up. "There's 2 fortune cookies left," Arnold said and held the bag out to her. "What?" Emily put her pen down and walked over to him. "I can have one." Arnold nodded and she reached in and took one. "You didn't have to do this," Emily said. "Thank you." Arnold nodded and turned to his door, opened it, and stepped into his dorm room and left it open. Emily watched him get changed back into shorts and he took off the open shirt, then she looked down at the plastic-wrapped cookie in her hands. She opened the plastic wrap and cracked the cookie open to read the fortune. "Perseverance is a virtue." Emily read silently and then she smiled. The girl that had asked him to watch television that morning didn't come over to ask him again, so Arnold sat down at his computer and looked up specimens for the next 2 hours. Thanks to Kelly's prompting, he searched specifically for 3-dimensional specimens, since that was what he truly wanted to see. There were not a lot of them on the internet, not in the detail that Arnold had expected or in a format that he had access to or could convert them to. The ones floating in jars were just static images that he had seen hundreds of times before. Almost none of them had the option to pull out the insides, because the insides were static images as well. This reminded Arnold of what his mother had said about him being frustrated about the lack of things he wanted on the internet, and he agreed with her. With none of the available 3-dimensional specimens at the level of detail his orderly mind required, he decided that he had to make one. All he needed was a model to duplicate. He immediately thought of the biology lab's storage and all of the specimens there, then realized that he didn't want to model another person's specimen and wanted to model his own. Arnold knew that the biology department only ordered the specimens that they needed and never more than that, which meant they didn't have any spares at the moment for him to use. That was why he hadn't been able to prepare any of his own specimens. His sudden presence in the lab hadn't been factored into the ordering schedule that had been set well before he accepted the job. That meant only one thing could be done. Arnold needed to hunt. He quickly put on his jeans, dug his backpack out of his closet with his things in it, and left the dorm room after locking the door. He received several subdued greetings and returned them, and none of them asked him where he was going. He didn't take the elevator this time, though. He almost ran down the stairs and then stopped at the bottom of the stairs on the ground floor. Arnold peeked out to see Doris as she sat behind her desk and stared out at the lobby and the people in it. The front door opened and a pair of girls came into the lobby and Arnold recognized them. "Ma!" Cicely yelled and opened her arms wide as she trotted over to the front desk. "Stop making a ruckus," Doris said half-heartedly and accepted the exaggerated hug with a laugh, because she loved her daughter and let her get away with everything. "Hi, Doris," Amy said and walked over at a normal pace and handed her a large brown paper bag. "We got you the special at the pizza place." "Wait, what?" Doris looked at her and at her daughter. "How in the world did you two get up early enough to go out to the pizza place?" "Ma, we weren't that drunk last night," Cicely said. "I remember leaving this morning and seeing the 3 of you passed out on the couch," Doris said, and Cicely and Amy laughed. "It's because of Arnold's mother," Amy said. "What?" Doris asked, surprised. "She told us the trick to not being hung over," Cicely said loudly. "Keep drinking. That's odd advice for an older woman to give college students," Doris said. Amy laughed again. "She said to have another drink to stop the withdrawal symptoms, actually." "That's what I said," Cicely said. Ma, I love you, she said and kissed her mother's cheek. I see somebody didn't stop at just one, Doris said and turned around to help Cicely sit down at her desk, which just so happened to turn her away from seeing the lobby. By the time she turned back around, Arnold had already left the building. I think you better eat some of this, too, Doris said and opened the bag to take out the spaghetti and meatball special and handed her daughter a plastic fork. Dig in. Thanks, Ma, Cicely said as she successfully speared a meatball and shoved it into her mouth. The first thing Arnold did was go right to the building that housed the maintenance department. Unlike a normal school with only one or two janitors, a college had a whole staff to clean the place. Since it was the weekend, they were out in force in all the areas that were normally not accessible because of the students, mainly the hallways and bathrooms of the main buildings. Hello, the woman at the desk just inside the door said when Arnold entered. Are you here to report a mess? No, Arnold said. I work in the biology department and I need to talk to the people in charge of vermin removal. The woman visibly shivered. You're going to want to see Carlos. He is all the way over in Building M, she said and picked up a walkie-talkie, changed the channel, and pushed the talk button. Hey, Carlos. What are you doing? She asked and let the button go. Damn it, woman, Carlos said. You made me miss my shot. Ugh. Disgusting, she said and then pushed the button. I've got a guy here from the biology department that wants to talk to you. I'm busy. Tell him to come back later. I can go meet him, Arnold said and she nodded. He says he'll come over to you. Oh. Well, tell him to go to the rear of M and open its gray back door, Carlos said with a chuckle. You know, you don't have to try and make me uncomfortable every single time I talk to you. Carlos laughed. It's fun seeing you squirm, he said and clicked off. Get back here, you stinking rat, Carlos nearly yelled and there was a sound of something sparking and then a squeal. Ha ha. Got you, you little bastard. Arnold followed the sounds and easily found a dark-haired man wearing a pair of janitor overalls. He was stuffing a large and still twitching rat into a large sack. I'll finish you off later, my pretty. Ha 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 ha. Carlos cackled, almost maniacally, then he saw Arnold. Oh, hey there, Carlos said in a normal voice. I'm just carrying on. Arnold looked at the bag and back at his face. Arnold looked and saw the stick had a trigger and the end was a two-pronged fork. It's a cattle prod, Carlos said. It won't do much against people except give them a nice shock and make them jump. Against rats and mice, it's like magic, he said. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Arnold pointed to his bag. You have a rat problem in the biology department? Carlos asked. No. I want that rat for a specimen, Arnold said to his surprise. You do realize they are disgusting and full of diseases, right? Carlos asked. It'll be properly treated before it's dissected, Arnold said. I don't know if I should hand a dangerous creature over. Did you catch anything else? Arnold asked and he shook his head. I won't have any specimens to work on until the new orders go in next month for the fall semester, then it'll be another month for them to come in. Yeah, specimens don't just grow on trees. They have to be caught, Carlos said. I'm still not comfortable just handing it over, so, how about a trade? Of what? Arnold asked. How about an hour or two of helping me track these things down? Carlos asked. Help me find how they are getting in, and any rats you catch you can keep. Do you have another cattle prod? Arnold asked and opened his backpack, then took out a thick canvas sack that was similar to the one Carlos held. Ha, you've done this before, Carlos said when he saw the bag. I guess you would be used to catching them if you can't afford to buy them. Arnold nodded. I'll let you take point, then. Carlos said and held up the cattle prod. I'll show you how to work this first and we can get started. Arnold listened and learned how to work it, then it was handed to him and he started to hunt. He was surprised by how much easier it was to use a cattle prod to reach his targets and shock them. He was going to have to check their insides and see if anything was damaged from the shock, just in case, but, other than that concern, over the next hour, Arnold hunted down half a dozen rats and stuffed them into his bag. Carlos had been a little surprised at the young man who had taken to hunting rats with a cattle prod like he had been doing it all his life. It would have taken him 2 to 3 times as long to get as many, and he had been doing it for years. After another half an hour of not finding another rat, they stumbled upon what Carlos thought was the source of their problems. They found a small broken drain pipe that was still attached to the sewer and hadn't been repaired. Thank God. A woman's voice said, full of relief. We need a sewer pipe repaired in grid 6. I'll wrap it in tape to cover the hole for now. That's great. I'll let Jerry know. Okay. Arnold said and they did just that. They found 3 more rats and no other possible entryways for them, so they went back to the stairs to leave. Hey, Carlos. Jerry said as he came down the stairs with a big bag of tools, a length of sewer pipe, and a plastic bag of supplies. Who's the new kid? We worked all this time and I didn't even get your name. Carlos said with a laugh. Arnold. Arnold said and handed the cattle prod back. Hi, Arnold. Carlos said. This is Jerry. Hey, kid. Jerry said. Carlos, you better come with me. If any of them nasty things try to jump at me while I'm working. Carlos laughed. Not a problem, Jerry. I got your back. He said. See ya, Arnold. The main chemicals he used in the solution were formaldehyde, phenol, methanol, and glycerin. They would allow the preservation of the specimens and allow easy dissections. The solution also cleaned and disinfected them and were highly dangerous to humans if inhaled, ingested, or absorbed through the skin. Arnold carefully placed all 9 rats inside the container and used the dipping and retrieval tool to push them down into the solution. Since the rats had only been stunned, it took them a minute or 2 to drown. Luckily, none of them woke up or tried to escape their watery chemical deaths. Once they died, he took each one out and made the proper small cuts on the limbs and abdominal cavity to allow the preservation fluid to enter it completely. Arnold put them back into the solution and covered the container, cleaned up the area, and placed the container on one of the shelves in the back of the storage area. He clearly marked it with his name, the specimen's scientific name and the amount inside, and the date of preservation. He needed to let them sit for at least several days to ensure that they were properly treated. It dinged and Arnold stepped inside the empty elevator and hit the button for the ground floor. He stepped out when it arrived there and walked over to Doris. Hi, Arnold. Doris said. Where are you going now? Is the cafeteria open? Only for students that stay here for the weekends. Doris said. They even ID them at the register. Arnold nodded and walked back over to the elevator and hit the button. He stepped in and hit the button for the top floor, then waited. When the doors opened, he was once again greeted with subdued enthusiasm. It was from all of them this time and not just the girls he had taken to lunch. They all knew now what he had done for the others, and even though more than half of them hadn't been able to go, they all knew that if they did, he would have paid for their meals, too. Arnold opened his dorm room door and went inside, put his backpack away, then changed into shorts again. He walked over to the refrigerator and looked inside, grabbed the pack of cheese, then went to the cupboard and grabbed a pack of crackers. A few of the girls saw him sit at the little kitchenette table and carefully cut up some of the cheese and put it on a dozen crackers. Word spread to everyone and the girls that had gone to lunch with him felt extra guilty now. They had a great meal for lunch that Arnold spent quite a bit of money on, and now he sat by himself and was only eating cheese and crackers for supper. In their minds, he was depressed at being alone and his girlfriend wasn't going to be coming back. Their hearts went out to him, and yet, none of them had the guts to go over to him and sit with him. They had already imposed on him a lot and none of them could figure out how to go to him and not keep imposing, because they assumed that if they went over, he would offer them some of his cheese and crackers. Arnold finished eating and wrapped up the cheese and put it back in the refrigerator and closed the pack of crackers and put them back in the cupboard. A few of the girls sighed sadly, because they had missed the opportunity to be there for him when he needed someone to be there, and that just added to their guilty feelings. It was evening now, so Arnold thought about what to do. He had to wait for his specimens to be ready, he didn't have any homework and he also didn't find any specimens online, so he decided to go to bed early. He walked over to his door and looked out at the girls that were looking back at him. He made eye contact with each of them and then spoke. "Good night," Arnold said and shut the door. Arnold took a shower and went to bed. He slept for most of the night and woke up before his alarm went off. He made the same breakfast as he did every morning, for toast with butter and a glass of orange juice, and noted that he was almost out of bread and juice. He changed out of his sleep clothes and dressed for work in a nice suit and clean underwear. He had enough clothes and underwear to last another few days before he had to get the clothes in the laundry basket washed. If Annie had known he would be doing a lot of this stuff by himself, she would have given him the same living together with someone classes she had given Kelly. What groceries to buy with such limited storage space, how to do the wash and not mess it up, and how to cook quick meals. She had been so relieved about Kelly being there and teaching her that she had completely overlooked what would happen if Arnold was left alone. Arnold wasn't concerned about it at the moment and opened his dorm room door to leave. He noticed that none of the other doors were open and looked at the clock beside his bed and saw that he was about an hour early for the normal hustle and bustle. He locked and closed the door, then walked as silently as he could down the hallway. He didn't bother with the elevator this time, since it was quite noisy, and walked down the stairs. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he saw Doris put a large plastic bag full of magazines and books on her desk. She took off her summer coat and hung it on the back of her chair and he saw that she wore a black blouse and black dress pants. As Doris took in a huge breath and let out a loud sigh, he walked over to her. "Good morning," Arnold said from right behind her. "By the curly hair of sweet baby Jesus, you scared the heavens out of me," Doris exclaimed when she caught her breath and turned to glare at him. "Apologize to me right now." "I'm sorry," Arnold said and put on the face that his father always used when he apologized to his mother after she demanded an apology. Doris caught her breath at the repentant face and tears almost came to her eyes. "Oh, it's all right. I forgive you," she said and opened her arms. "Come here and give me a hug." Doris let him go and she pat her chest. "I'm wearing a bustier today to give my sore shoulders a rest." Arnold reached out and put his hands on her shoulders and rubbed the clavicles with his thumbs and used his fingers to dig a little into the muscle and gave her shoulders a massage. "I'm sorry. I can't kiss them and make them feel better," Arnold said. Doris took a few moments to register what he said. Excuse me. I'm only allowed to kiss my girlfriend, so all I can do is rub your shoulders," Arnold said and kept doing it. "I know it's not as effective as kissing the sore spot, though." WW8. Doris had a hard time not enjoying what he was doing, since her shoulders really were sore and getting a massage felt really, really good. "If you weren't dating Kelly," she started to say and looked into his eyes, "you would rub and kiss my shoulders, because I told you that they were sore." "Yes," Arnold said without hesitation. Doris saw a brief glint of something in his eyes. She instinctually knew it was the look that a man gave a woman when he thought they would be sleeping together, and it gave her a little shiver. She hadn't felt that in a while and it kind of threw her normal sensibilities off a little. "Oh, I suppose, yes, that would be nice," Doris said haltingly, then her eyes widened. What am I saying?" Arnold gave her shoulders one last squeeze and let them go. I need to get to work. Oh, okay. Have a good day. Doris said and kept looking into his eyes to see if another glint would appear. She didn't see it and she started to doubt if she had seen it the first time. Her mind started to justify it as some kind of irrational fantasy that she was having with a young man that was less than half her age. Arnold walked across the lobby and Doris walked around her desk and sat down. Right in the middle of her desk was the fortune she had found inside the cookie. Be wary of those around you. Doris read and looked at the front door as Arnold left the building. Now I know what you meant. Arnold was very early for work and when he went to the professor's office, it was closed and the lights were off. Since he didn't know what they were going to be doing to prep for the next day's classes, he walked over to the main lobby display called Adam and stood in front of it. Now that he had the time to examine it, he did so. For over an hour. It wasn't until Professor Hamel Krenslav came into the lobby that Arnold stopped his examination of every aspect and detail of Adam. You're here already? Hamel asked. For an hour and 20 minutes, sir. Arnold said and Hamel jerked to a stop. What? Why so early? Hamel asked, surprised. I had nothing else to do. Arnold responded. You've just been standing here all that time? Hamel asked and Arnold nodded. Now I regret not showing you beforehand what to do to prep the lab classroom for tomorrow. He said with a chuckle. Well, nothing to be done about it now. He said and walked by. I just have to drop my things off in my office and we can get started on refining your education on specimen dissection. Arnold followed him and waited just outside the office. Hamel dropped off his briefcase, a leather sacque, and his suit coat. Sir, I've never done a heart dissection before. Arnold said. That's why we're doing it today. Hopefully you'll pick up enough of it that if a student asks for assistance during the week, you'll have enough knowledge to help them. I'll do my best, sir. Arnold said. Now, the tools needed are slightly different, as are the materials for retrieving slivers of the tissue and preparing them for microscope viewing on slides. Hamel said as they entered the storage space. Of course, I'll have to give you a crash course on that aspect as well. Yes, sir. Arnold said. I'm glad that you aren't so confident in your skills that you reject knowledge. Being able to accept that you need to learn something is essential for advancement. Hamel said with a chuckle. Even I learned something new when I saw your college entrance specimen. What was that? Arnold asked as he held the cooler door open to let the professor retrieve a medium-sized container. I ignored the obvious details in my normal specimens and didn't label them. Hamel said. Namely, the main veins, arteries, and the nervous system bundles. Arnold thought back to the display upstairs. Adam doesn't have them labeled, either. Hamel laughed. No, and as Amy is so fond of saying, it is the jewel of my collection. He said. It also can't be opened to correct that oversight, since it's permanently mounted, so I have to live with it not being complete. Arnold nodded and closed the door, took the container from the professor and followed him back up the stairs and into the lab. Once there, the professor showed him the proper setup needed for their project. It would need to be recreated 36 times, for 3 classes in a row, so the students have the same versatility. When that was done, the professor showed him how to properly dissect the heart to expose the insides without damaging the heart, so that the movement of the valves wasn't impeded and would still function if air pressure was added, by either compression of the heart muscle or added externally. After that, he took appropriate tissue samples from different areas that would be tested for different diseases and prepared microscope slides for them, labeled them appropriately from the parts they were taken from, then set them in a small rack. And that's that. Hamel said and stood back from his work and let out a satisfied sigh. I believe we can call it a day for the learning part. He said and Arnold helped clean everything up and they stored the specimen and the slides. Now we just have to set up the student areas. Arnold nodded and they both got to work.